This profession has a secret substance problem that nobody talks about? Is this the group of questions where we all find out that most people we interact with daily are on stuff most of or all of the time? Actually, in America, the testing of sanitary sewer water shows that everyone is on way more stuff than they report if you just surveyed them. And as someone who used to test sanitary sewer water, I can tell you that everyone who does that job is dosed up to the eyeballs as well. Once I got into dental school, our eyes were opened by the Wellbeing Foundation, an arm of the Missouri Dental Association. A couple of the guys who were addicts and had been in recovery for years came in and discussed substance overuse and how wildly it can spiral. After talking to a friend and mentor who's been sober from opioids and alcohol, both for 45 years, he talked about how many healthcare professionals from all disciplines there were just in our little rural area. No names or personal info, of course. It's crazy to me still that people I would never have suspected, and so many of them were the high-functioning Type A go-getters. Lawyers. Holy frick. Yeah, I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. I can't tell you how many of them are burned out from the profession by 40 and spiraling into addiction. The practice of law is often both boring and intensely stressful. It's never glamorous. I imagine the problem begins earlier and is worse in big law because of the huge billing requirements, but those lawyers have the staff to keep them from committing malpractice or an ethical violation. Many lawyers end up broke and some lose their license. My state has a whole office dedicated to lawyer assistance for these problems. Lawyers are also a top answer for alcoholism. Many of them have a severe drinking problem. I'm a bartender and I got out of a pickle when the judge and prosecutor were regulars. The judge said to the prosecutor, "This doesn't seem like the friendly guy I know. Would you agree?" "Yeah, Your Honor. State recommends that the case be dismissed." This is when my lawyer turned to me and said, "What the frick just happened?" Every single meal at every restaurant you've enjoyed has been lovingly prepared by a team of herb heads. If it's a fancy restaurant, then they're taking white snow instead. I'm always kind of baffled by this one. I may have ADHD, I'll find out soon. But when I'm medicated on green herb, I forget everything, even more than I do when I'm sober. There's no chance in hell I could work in a kitchen and remember to take this off the stove or that out of the oven. Hats off to whoever can do that, because it's certainly not me. I'm self-employed, and I can tell you that at the place where I work at, that guy is lighting up a doobie 24/7. Well, so far, this self-employed narrator's only dangerous addiction is plastic overpriced miniatures. In fact, my alcoholism is a fraction of its former self. Yay to moving to different habits. I work in manufacturing, and the number of people who are alcoholics and other addicts at work is probably between 5 to 10%. The number of people who are alcoholics and other addicts at home is probably closer to 50. Factory night shifts run on nose snow here. If they actually substance tested, they'd lose half the factory. I used to work for Ford and yep, same. Crazy amounts of snow or pills that keep you up. Crazy stuff happens at night though. I had one guy trying to gather as much money as he could and was working 2.5 shifts, meaning he had 2 full-time jobs and a part-time one. We'd let him work the first 4 hours and then let him sleep on his lunch until clock-out time. I've done call center work. 80% of the people there are high or drunk. It's literally the only way to mentally deal with 50 calls in an hour. It's crazy, but I did customer service work from home and I tried to drink some beers a few times towards the end of my shift while taking calls, but it just made me paranoid that I'd make a mistake, so it wasn't even fun. I know a lot of my coworkers were doing that though. My manager even encouraged it. She was like, "We don't get paid enough, so just do what you have to do in order to get through the day." Believe it or not, orchestra musicians, Adderall, painkillers especially. It's a very, very competitive field and they always have to be at 110%. When I was at Juilliard, there'd be about 10 orchestra players who were baked out of their minds on any performance. One of my best friends was this proper Korean girl who was on something 24/7. We'd get insanely blazed and she'd just go to rehearsal without having looked at the music. She'd just sight read while fully medicated. One friend liked to perform while tripping on A. He made it to Juilliard from masters. Substances are everywhere. I worked as a professional rock and roll musician and I'm blowing the whistle now. I suspect illegal substances are being used in the industry. Self-righteous gasp! Farriers, as in people who do horseshoeing. 98% of them are extreme heavy drinkers. The job is extremely high stress and high stakes. Most people don't realize that shoeing a horse is extremely dangerous. They see videos online and think that horses are just big dogs, and they are not. They are like 1,200-pound or more animals with the flight instincts of a deer. They can crush you and not even realize it. On top of that, you spend long periods of time isolated in a truck driving between stops, dealing with traffic and other terrible drivers. And on top of that, you're interacting with owners who know next to nothing about hoof care but have the ability to fire you, and depending on how many horses they own, put you in financial ruin. Horses get new shoes every 4 to 5 weeks, so your body never gets a break. You're expected to be on call at all times on top of dealing with veterinarians and the people training the horses. Law firms. Holy moly. I did a semester at a community college for paralegal studies, and we had a class on how to navigate situations if the lawyers you're working with are addicts, and possibly working high or drunk. And a lot of it was based on how to save your job while still maintaining professional integrity. Like, you might not want to report your supervising lawyer to his direct supervisor, but instead reach out to a peer of his and ask for intervention. It was wild to see all of these professional lawyers on the panel telling us how, in an ideal world, we should be reporting people to the bar, but in reality, that won't change a damn thing besides costing us our jobs. So the best thing we can do to affect clients positively is figure out workarounds. I'm an attorney, and my partner once told me if they start substance testing lawyers, they'd lose all the good ones. Construction, which is terrifying. I think a better question is what profession has surprisingly few users? Lab. It's lab. We're all autistic and we all follow the rules. You know, reading these comments, it sounds a bit like every profession is full of substances. Politic. In the UK, they found traces of white snow in all the bathrooms of the Houses of Parliament, and Michael Gove, a senior Conservative, was caught on camera off his nut in the chambers, but absolutely nothing is done about it. Meanwhile, they continue to criminalize the substances that they consume. Hypocrites. I think they found something similar in the US as well. I worked in a fine dining restaurant across from the state capitol. Our customers were 90% staffers, lobbyists, and other people working in and around politics. They drank like it was going out of style. They partied hard with us, and they'd spend the whole night talking about all the events they'd gone to over the years. They were also having a lot of affairs. Their jobs required quite a bit of travel when it wasn't session days, and they took advantage of that. Most of the time, it felt like I was serving 40-plus-year-old frat bros and sorority girls. It seems like it's most jobs. The better question would have been, which jobs, if any, don't put you at high risk for substance use or alcoholism? From the responses, it seems like a societal problem rather than an occupational one. I'm sure someone more eloquent can expand on that. The mental health field. Most of us have some lived experience ourselves. That, combined with the secondary trauma we experience on a daily basis, leads many of us to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. Airline pilots. It's really hard for them to get help because admitting they need help is almost the same consequence as getting caught. Granted, I don't think it's a massive problem, but addiction is everywhere, man. My best friend is a public defender. He drinks like nobody I've ever met. Keeps a breathalyzer. He blows a .25 or more every night and then stops for 11 hours before he's got to drive to work so that he's blowing zeros in the morning. He has a script for Adderall, one for Ambien, and one for absurd amounts of Klonopin. And he smokes green herb. He used to do a lot of smack too, but he substituted that with ketamine. About 14 grams of ketamine a week. My God, I mean, I guess that's technically a functioning addict in that they make sure they have no problem getting back to work and stuff, but that's just a horrifying amount that he's just presumably taking on the daily. If I did one dose of all those things in 1 year, I'd consider that the wildest year of my life. Scaffolders. God, yeah. I couldn't believe how many people did stuff and openly talked about doing it. I watched one on site puff on a smack pipe and then strike a scaffold. That was scary stuff. Being a tow truck driver is a smackhead profession more often than not. It's not always illegal stuff, but K-12 teaching. One of the reasons I quit was because I saw so many teachers developing a, well, home is where the wine is, lifestyle after their first few years. At one school, I was gifted alcohol on my first day as a joke because you're gonna need it. In the education community, alcoholism and other substances use absolutely exploded during the pandemic when teachers had to work from home with an increased level of stress, decreased support, and constant access to substances. A lot of teachers are also hard partiers outside of work hours because of the stress. Very few teachers are going to show up to teach students while on stuff, but some people I knew definitely did that stuff routinely on the weekends as a way to blow off steam. It takes a lot less time than actual self-care. I'm sober and in the 12-step community. The amount of teachers in my meetings who were recovering from addictions developed during the pandemic, every possible kind of addiction, is insane. I'm very happy that I switched career paths. This surprised me when I was a bartender. A disproportionate number of my regulars were elementary school teachers. I tried to get my boss to let us have a special night for educators like we have for industry people, but he wouldn't go for it. I don't think people want it advertised that we're driving our teachers to drink. I'm guessing HR, they all seem to be doing smack. Sales. I used to work in sales and my coworkers did white snow on the daily, amongst other things. Oh my god. I worked at a sales company and our new HR lady was obsessed with professionalism and she wanted to substance test everyone in the company once a year. The management flat out asked her if she had a plan for replacing 50% of our salespeople. I had to break that to my sales manager. A disgruntled former employee wrote on Glassdoor that people were smoking green herb in the parking lot, and while true, so was that guy. The management team was kicking around, instituting substance testing in response. My manager asked my opinion, and I told him it was a great idea if they wanted to replace their entire sales team. He asked me about a few of the ones that you wouldn't have suspected, and I reiterated that it was a great idea if you wanted to replace your entire sales team. They just asked us to please quit smoking Mary J in the parking lot instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Scrolling through this thread, it seems like a pretty large segment of the population of the US is struggling with substance overuse, and I almost feel left out. Hairdressers. Yes, I'm surprised we didn't hear this earlier. Hairdressers are freaks and they party like there's no tomorrow. One salon I worked at was full of people strung out on crystal, including the owners. We had an employee meeting where everyone was advised to keep on track of their stuff and wipe their noses if applicable. They put a smoke detector in the bathroom because they wanted everyone to go out back to smoke theirs. The owner would sit in a little room and watch everyone on cameras all day. The owners also went to New York and came straight to the salon from the airport. They were all so dosed up that they started pulling out all the fancy pipes they bought while there and showing them to clients. It was a circus. I quit 2 weeks later. I can personally speak to this. The high-end fashion industry, both legal and illegal. It's easy to stay thin if your diet is water and pills. It might be quicker to say professions that aren't commonly on illegal stuff. Engineers. They're high on math. Anesthesiologists. I had a case where someone stole fentanyl off an anesthesiologist's cart. The hospital figured, we can just test everyone who had access to the room and whoever tests positive for fentanyl is the one that stole the cart. Nope, everyone tested positive for fentanyl. The anesthesiologist, the tech, the nurse, the pharmacist, and the farm tech all tested positive. Turns out more than 30% of people who work in anesthesiology fields self-report diverting substances for personal use. Those are just the ones that casually admit it as well. Anybody in a call center. Nurses. Remembering a former nurse who taught me how to embezzle morphine from the hospital. These people don't play with their stuff. Hey, don't forget doctors. A lot of them are using a lot of Adderall and any stimulant, really. Nurses get a bad rep, and I understand that, but in peds nursing, I haven't seen any overuse at all. Or they're just good at hiding it. My source? I was a doctor in another country and now a ped nurse in the US. I currently work in a hospital, but I'm not employed by them. I work for a contractor in the dietary department. One of my many daily jobs is taking items to different departments throughout the hospital. Ours is pretty damn big, and I think it might be the 3rd or 4th largest in my state. There's lots of corridors and elevators that are just for staff, and there's lots of them that don't get used much. Half the basement is underground and half is not. The hospital was built into a hill. The amount of times I've rounded a corner into one of those corridors or tunnels and there's a doctor or nurse or whatever doing stuff that they absolutely shouldn't be is wild. I've caught people doing the deed, I've caught a damn doctor shooting something up, I've caught the head of radiology hitting an effing smack pipe. I didn't see the pipe, but nothing in the world smells like that except smack. I've seen people passing money and med bottles to one another. I've seen nurses trying to bury their empty bottle of liquor in the waste bin closet. Everyone seems to be doing it with everyone somehow, and it's nuts how much of a crazy, racy smackden all hospitals are. And these folks are the ones who help us when we're hurt. Literally mind-blowing. And I've only been here 2 years. Restaurants. The vast majority of the cooks are not late-life fancy Anthony Bourdain, but early-life addicted hungover Anthony Bourdain. Also, yeah, I know that to people in the industry this isn't big news, but when my parents found this information out through my stories and others, they were literally shocked. I think the older generation still saw it as an artistic trade. So listen, the servers are all smoking Mary J, the line cooks are all alcoholics, the owner and manager probably does white snow or something, and there's usually one guy back of house, good odds it's the guy doing the dishes, who's on something really hard. Back in the early 90s, I worked as a sous chef in a very upscale restaurant on Palm Beach. If you were hungover or going slow and it was approaching time for service, the manager would tell you to go to the bathroom and get your head straight. On top of the back of the toilet, covered with a magazine, there were perpetually a couple of lines of white snow available anytime for any of the back-of-house staff. I only found out years later it was supplied by the owner of the restaurant, a very wealthy and well-known figure in Palm Beach society. It was a morale booster from him. And this is surprising to literally nobody who works in the service industry. You're right. You've got to have some method of coasting through all that stress if you don't want to age 5 years in one like I did. Lawyers, doctors and nurses, chefs, cooks, waiters and waitresses, construction, truckers, and honestly a lot of people in power right now. We're talking presidential staff and representatives. Also, college professors, a lot of people in science and chemistry work right now. My wife is a chemist and 90% of her coworkers and managers have admitted to Adderall and white snow usage. Basically, any type of work that requires a lot of long hours, intense concentration, and the ability to be available at any given time. I'm not against the people who use these for reasons, honestly. It sucks, but they do what they have to do in order to survive, and to get the job done and not get replaced. I am, however, against the place we're at in the world where these people feel like this is the route they have to take in order to do what they are ordered to do so they can afford to survive and be a, quote, team player. You cannot expect your average person to work in high-stress jobs with high-stress hours and a high-stress work week schedule while also demonizing these people for doing and using whatever they can to be your ideal tool to use every waking hour of the day, and when they can't because the person you're using has tried to give up substances or never begun to use them and are burning out, they're tossed away like trash. It's sad. Military amphetamines, police, free reign on whatever, usually white snow. Healthcare is basically instant access to prescriptions. Lawyers are notorious white snow and poppers guys. Wall Street and finance, Wolf of Wall Street shenanigans. Teachers, it's just booze. Bankers, and I don't mean your average tellers, but your higher-up bankers do so much white snow and ketamine it's ridiculous. And these people handle your finances. The real answer is way more people use substances that are illegal or of dubious legality than we care to think. Much of it is socially acceptable, like herb smokers in states where it's not legal, so we tend to overlook it. I think the big surprises are the high-profile, high-intellect field. They're smart enough to know how to manage it and hide it, and especially utilize it appropriately. It's probably not a surprise for my field, but making games for a couple of decades, almost everyone's an alcoholic. To the point where we didn't even hide it at one studio where I worked at. There was a keg on wheels and you could nominate someone to park it next to their desk if they were on a roll. It wasn't just booze. That was just the part we didn't hide. We all drank professionally and accidentally made games along the way. We had a green herb balcony and a smack alley. If you work 20+ hours a day, constantly stressing your brain by pushing creative boundaries within production timeframes, you've just got to do what you can. But they were all still some of the smartest and creative and most professional people I've ever worked with. You'd never know Bill was off his rockers on benzos because he just checked in a shader change that could have its own GDC talk, or Mike just dropped a score that's about to get a Grammy after 30 straight hours of work with a keg literally a foot away from his chair. Then we all show up at 8 AM the next day, stable as a board, and we do it all again. Turns out everyone is doing stuff and drinking because our economic system is soul-sucking to the majority of us. Who would have guessed? Construction. Paving company employees doing my driveway were hitting the smack pipe on their brakes. I work big road projects and I've seen them fire the wing operator for being hungover. Like with most construction, the guys doing the huge government projects are generally tightly tested, paid well, and generally not into substances or only into alcohol on their off days. Gotta tell you, the US Special Forces are regularly involved in substance trafficking. Yeah, I've heard it's the same with the CIA. They've been funding illegal black operations that way since at least the 1980s and likely much earlier. Look up Gary Webb for God's sakes. Stay-at-home parents. Most of the mums in the neighborhood I grew up with would go through several bottles of wine a week and pop pills all day long. Adderall, Xanax, Ritalin, various opioids. A lot of them had older kids and cleaning services, so aside from making meals and shopping, there wasn't much else to do to pass the time. Doctors. I was a bartender in this real small dive bar, and this anesthesiologist would always be there. He'd arrive after his shift, it was always early afternoon, until closing and would always talk about how early he'd have to get up. He'd claim 2 to 3 hours of sleep per night. He always had crazy meds in him and was always the life of the party. Everyone loved him. That guy was wild. If I ever have to get put under, I'm going to go to a different country because I fear he'll be treating me. Also, I'm noticing people commenting all have similar stories about male doctors. I'm curious what the substance situation is like for the females in the industry. Post office. It's so horrible here that we need to self-medicate. There should be a green herb booth and a self-deletion booth in every post office. Commercial fishing. And a lot of them end up taking a fatal amount as well because they'll go 2 to 3 months not using since they can't do it on the boat. Once they get back to harbor or home, they feel like they need to catch up. It's a pretty bad cycle and substances are everywhere in the industry. EMS in the United States. Medics doing lines on the way to calls and stuff. Anesthesiologists. I keep seeing this one and it makes me laugh every time because my cousin's an anesthesiologist and she's basically a frickin' nun. That had to be a shock to her system, meeting her co-workers. Are you all on the devil's lettuce? Illegal only in that they can't prescribe it to themselves, but my understanding is that anesthesiology has a disproportionate number of substance users. All of them. I've learned 2 things as an adult. First, cheese is prohibitively expensive, and second, everyone does white snow. I work at a country club, so there's 2 professions I've got for you that stand out. Attorneys and people in sales. The guy in sales who told you he worked from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and he's doing that every day, all day? That's not Red Bull. That's something else.
What made you straight up nope out of a relationship? How about things that should have been red flags, but I was too naive to recognize? Left notes on my car windshield when I was at work or a friend's house or the store. It seemed sweet, but I realized later that was my significant other keeping tabs on me, even when I didn't say where I was. Would let me know how much a hitman cost and that it was cheaper than you'd expect. Would tell me something and then later say that it was a lie or a test, as though I should have figured that out instead of expecting the truth. Expected me to answer every call, and would get angry if I wanted to end the call first. And lastly, complained about my friends and family all the time. All of them. Apparently, everyone I knew was manipulative and or rude. I didn't figure out this was an attempt to isolate me until after we broke up. He had already shown very jealous tendencies and had smacked me over the head because he thought I was looking at a guy, so it wasn't good already. We were outside of his friend's house and his friend asked how I was doing, and he got mad at me for answering. I just got in my car and drove away. I kept having to call the cops to calm down my wife after she became addicted to a slew of prescription drugs. I told her doctors that opiates for a ruptured vertebra, stimulants for ADHD, Ambien for most nights to help her sleep, and an assortment of others for anxiety and depression, and more to combat side effects, made her violent. One of the times that I called the cops to calm the situation down during a bad episode just made me cry. All he had to say was that he had already been there and asked when it would stop. I thought I'd been holding things together reasonably well. I had an office job where no one knew what was up, though my work had suffered greatly. I kept clothes and food in my trunk, just in case I had to stay out for a bit because she decided I was part of the conspiracy. I had a gym on the way to work where I could shower or just have some downtime. I did all of our housework and errands because she couldn't work or do much of anything most of the time. Each time she cut herself, she told the hospital it was an accident, and she always tried to go to a different one. We lived in a major metro between hospitals. The cop saw through it. Being seen like that and knowing that even that lifestyle was running out hurt. I'm now recovering from the divorce and enjoying the calm. I still sometimes panic for no reason, and I feel more comfortable with clothes and food stashed in the trunk, but I feel much healthier. I get more sleep, my blood pressure is normalized for the most part, and I don't cry at work anymore. I received a message that clearly wasn't meant for me. We had just had our first date, which went really well, calling me cheap and a slimeball and how I'm on my last chance to make things right on her coming birthday with lots of presents. I replied, "Hi, this is X. We just met and had one date. Was that message for someone else?" She replied pretending to be her 12-year-old sister. Then apparently her dad messaged me with how he's told off his younger daughter. I'm out. Screw that. showing up at my door when I hadn't disclosed my address. For clarification, I'm a guy and we'd only just started dating. I'm very aware of giving out my address until I know who I'm dealing with. I don't want to end up with a stalker if things go sour. It happened anyway in this case. After maybe 2 years of him constantly trying to make me jealous, we temporarily had a 16-hour time difference as I was traveling home to see my grandparents. When I was asleep for maybe 7 hours because, well, it was nighttime and hadn't responded to his 50 texts, he finally said that he was going to spend some time with other girls for 7 hours that day because that's how long I was probably going around spreading my legs. I don't know why, but at that moment, it was like a moment of clarity, and I just replied okay, blocked him, his family, and all his friends, and just moved on. He followed me on a night out and got on his knees stopping traffic in the middle of a city center street to declare his love. We'd been on 2 dates. He also told me that same night he could see into the future and already knew he was going to die defending my honor while I was carrying our twins. Yeah, he was fun. She told me she was on birth control. Turns out she thought drinking a lot of Mountain Dew would make it so she couldn't get pregnant. We were married for 6 years. I started out thinking she was just struggling with depression and anxiety sometimes, but things kept escalating. I walked away when she started threatening to stab me in my sleep. We had already tried several couples therapists and individual therapists, but she refused to consider medication. I called her to meet up and try to find some closure, but she cut me off telling me I wasn't allowed to leave her and as punishment, she was sleeping with 2 other guys. At that point, I just ignored her number and filed for divorce. I hope she's doing well, but I'm glad to not be afraid for my life anymore. We weren't in a relationship per se, but I had a developing thing with a guy once. Until one day when I wasn't around, he and some other friends of ours went to a bar, and he sneakily slipped stronger alcohol into some other girl's drink there. This girl was apparently talking a lot with one of our other friends and not showing much attention to him. So he grew jealous and threw this friend on the floor and started to strangle him. He was obviously thrown out of the bar after that, and later tried to play it off as just a joke and just messing around. How do you jokingly try to strangle someone? Anyway, I dropped this guy out of my life right after I found out. I definitely wouldn't want to be stuck with someone like that. My most recent ex would always ask me random questions, like, what would you do if someone came running towards us right now? Bearing in mind that's pretty vague, I'd answer something like, move out of the way so they can keep running. And she'd say, wrong answer. Then get mad at me because she meant to attack us, and I didn't say I'd jump in the way to defend her. And she used to ask all sorts of very different vague questions, and when I'd answer, she'd say, wrong answer, and get mad at me for not answering the way she wanted me to. Got out of there as quickly as I could. She picked me because I had the same first name, general appearance, and lived in the same area of the state as her ex-fiance of 2 years, that she had just been dumped by a month before we met. I felt even more offended about all of that than just being straight up rejected. I'm a black person. My bestest buddy in the whole world is a white person. We were roomies at one point. He brought a date over, I met her, nothing weird. But as it turned out, she had a problem with my bromeo living with a black person, being me. He immediately broke it off with her. I don't have many friends, but I'd like to think I have quality over quantity. I had a huge crush on her for a while, but never had the opportunity to talk to her given our weird work schedules. Then a friend from work sets us up, and I was elated. First date goes really well, and we hit it off. We start spending as much time as we can around each other, talking on the phone every night, all the special things you do when you're starting a new relationship. Then she starts coming over more often unannounced. She would stay for a couple of nights, then a week, then 2 weeks. I would come home from work and she would be in my house, sometimes drunk. The thing was, she had almost been fired for an incident involving alcohol before and was lying to them about her sobriety. She would have a few too many, then go off about her family or how I wasn't taking our 2-month relationship serious enough. The final straw dropped on Valentine's Day this year. She gets annihilated to the point of not being able to walk on her own. After I refuse her drunk advances, she flips out. What followed was a couple hours of her threatening to drive home drunk, sitting outside so the cold weather would freeze her to death, laying in my bed and wailing my name until her voice was hoarse, and alternating between maniac laughter and crying. 2 days later, once she was sobered up, I told her to kick rocks. We had dated for just around 3 months. Quickest turnaround ever for me in a relationship. This happened on the second date. For context, we'd known each other since we were kids, flirted a lot over the years as casual friends, not close friends, just acquaintances, then decided to try dating in our 20s. Him, do you want to get married someday? Me, maybe, I don't know. I'm not even sure if marriage is right for me. I kinda just want to travel and build a career and stuff. That's all I'm thinking about right now. Him, what about in 5 years' time? Me, I don't know, maybe. I mean, if it's the right man, maybe. Him, I've loved you ever since we were kids. Me, thanks. Him, if we were together 5 years from now, would you marry me? Me, I'm not really sure. Spoiler alert, at this point, I'm desperate to run away. Him, I'd hit a girl if she didn't marry me after 5 years, like straight up beat her. Yeah. Bye-bye to the friendship too. She talked a lot about hating guys being cheap on dates. First date, I take her to a really good sushi place and spend like $120 cause I wanted to be nice. She said she would pay for us next time cause she was extremely flattered. For the second date, she chose the place and she took me to McDonald's. For context, she isn't broke, even gets triple what I make. Like, I don't really care where you take me, but come on, man. Why set the bar so high only to immediately ignore it when you have to be even? She told everybody she knew about any little disagreement. Anytime I could be perceived as unreasonable, it was everybody's business. But somehow the surprises, special dates, lending her cousin rent money, all of that was never brought up. Just the negative stuff was public knowledge. Genuinely feared for my safety. I went over and we got in an argument, so I slept on the floor essentially. I went to the bathroom to text one of my buddies to come pick me up, since I thought she'd fallen asleep. I suddenly get a text from her saying, "Where are you?" And my phone made a sound. I froze up and opened the bathroom door and she was already standing there waiting for me in the darkness. She didn't say a word at all, just stared at me until I walked by. I went back to my spot on the floor and got under the blanket and pretended to be going asleep until she did. After about 30 minutes, I decided to peek out from under the covers, and she was literally towering over me in the darkness with her eyes wide open the entire time. I got out of there so fast. He didn't have a car, so I'd help him with rides to work. He worked third shift at Toys R Us stocking shelves. I picked him up one night, and he was so drunk he could barely stand. I made some comment about how he isn't going to be able to work. He started throwing things at me in the parking lot. I threw his stuff on the ground and left him there. I've dealt with too many alcoholics, and I wasn't wasting any more of my time. Cut to 5 years later, he's sober now and getting married this year, so good for him. My brother came to visit me. After I spent the whole day with my girlfriend, it was time to see my brother because we didn't see each other for a long time. We prepared some snacks and were about to start Lord of the Rings because both of us love Lord of the Rings. She called me and started a long conversation on the phone. I told her my brother was waiting for me, and she said that I can't spend my time with anyone because it belongs to her. It was the last talk between the two of us. We had dinner plans. She didn't show up and didn't pick up her phone all evening. Then she turned up at around midnight in her car hammered. I tried to take her keys and she ran out of the house. I followed. She then drove her car at me. I called her brother to come pick her up. The next morning, I dropped her car and her belongings at her place and said goodbye. We went to the mall and stopped by this little kiosk selling cookies. I decided that I would get one cookie. The lady working there said if I buy two, I get one free. I decided to buy two and get the third one free. My date went off on this lady saying she's trying to scam me, etc., etc. He was legit yelling so loud that it was echoing through the mall. It was so embarrassing. If you're rude to people in customer service, you're not for me. When my now ex-wife came to the living room where I was sleeping on the couch after a fight and started lunging at me, she asked me if she reminded me of my stepdad who used to come in my room at night and stand over me before he dragged me out of bed by my ankles. He would then put the boots to me for whatever sins I had committed that day. She was the only person I had ever shared this with. She went out of town for work 2 days later, and when she came home, I was gone and in another state. It was remarkable the amount of abuse I put up with to that point. It dawned on me then that if he had returned to my life, I wouldn't let him hurt me. So there was no reason to let her abuse me either. I dated this girl who was jealous, and I mean super jealous. I couldn't hang out with any of my friends without her constantly calling me. Obviously, I couldn't do the same because how could I be jealous? That would have meant I didn't trust her. That's annoying enough to end a relationship, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. After 9 months, I found out from one of my friends, who also happened to be a close friend of hers, that she'd been hiding her sexuality to me. She was actually bi. At first, I didn't really get why she did that, because I absolutely have no problem with these things. A mutual friend then told me she was going around messing around with other chicks. So basically she was hiding her bisexuality so that she could have sex with any girl she wanted to without me even suspecting anything. Sometimes she even had threesomes with the girls' boyfriends. When I told her I knew everything, she started telling me that she didn't want me to know because those people didn't really matter for her and she didn't love them. Needless to say, I noped out of there. It was already on the rocks from roughly around the time the millionth drunken argument happened. However, the moment that sealed it was when she said something to me along the lines of, "If your dad wanted to be alive, he would still be here." My dad died in a car accident 3 years before that. Immediately went from loving her enough to make it work to thinking that she was the most vile person on earth. My brother took a girl to a high-end sushi place, and his date ordered 3 times the food he did. He just got a grilled salmon. She ate almost none of it, and at the end, she said she ordered all the extras so she could take some home for tomorrow. When the waiter showed up for the bill, she excused herself to go to the bathroom. The waiter asked my brother if he wanted to split the check, and at that point, my brother did the right thing and stuck her with $100 worth of sushi and booze. The girl returned to see a huge check at her seat. After our first date, she sent me a Google Maps pin of my address with just "ha ha" as the only context. I hadn't told her my address. She then followed it up with asking how my boss was by using his first name. I hadn't mentioned the name of anyone I worked with. That level of stalker made me pull the eject handle real quick. It started with me telling her that it must have been great to grow up with parents from different cultures. On the second date, after her talking uninterrupted about her family's background for 45 minutes. No irony from me or anything, just a straight up positive and genuine comment. This was followed by 30 minutes of full emotional breakdown in a packed bar and loud comments about my perception of race, which was then followed by intense stare downs from every patron in the bar, which was then followed by the waiter swooping in with shots for her, asking to pay her bill, and asking me if I needed to leave. I felt bad about triggering some sort of trauma, but yeah. I was publicly accused of racism on the second date. Always wondered what the third date had in store, but didn't stick around to find out. She showed up late at my place one night because she couldn't sleep at her place alone. I was fine with that until she started talking about the reason why. When she was alone, the demons in the corners and edges of the room would fill the dark spots and watch with their glowing eyes. I urged her continuously to get help, to go to the doctor, but she wouldn't do it. What she was seeing was real. I felt terrible leaving her for that, but I wasn't equipped to deal with someone who needed professional help and refused it. She came to stay for the first time. It was the night before New Year's Eve and we were planning to go out drinking for New Year's Eve. I had just worked a 12-hour shift. I was a carpet fitter, so manual labor, and I was exhausted. She had a few drinks and started to get aggressive, because I just wanted to relax that night, but she wanted to go out drinking. We broke up 3 days later. My father was an aggressive drunk when I was a kid, so I could see how it would go. If you know you're an aggressive drunk, get off the drink, man. I was interested in this woman I worked with many years ago, and the feeling was mutual. We had gone bowling a couple of times and we had started talking about potentially dating. She said, if we date, I expect to be taken out at least twice a week, given gifts at least once a week, and we won't have sex for at least 3 months. Considering we had almost the same work schedule, I have no idea how she thought I was going to pull any of that off. Her father recently got into a brawl with a date's teenage kid. I was concerned and asked questions. She then explained how the teen had it coming because they didn't know their place. Feeling confused, I asked her to elaborate again. It turned out that a grown man punched a mentally disabled autistic teen rather than simply walk away. I told her that I refuse to date people who are cool with domestic violence. She was immediately remorseful, but then defended her father's drunken violent outburst against a child a few moments later. Don't date people who think that an adult ought to beat mentally disabled children. Not even a relationship, but got very close. Met a guy through a local theater, and I thought he was cool. But then he started following me around everywhere when I was at practice and shows. The last straw was when I didn't get notified that a practice had been canceled, and he was waiting there, saying, "I just felt like someone would show up." And it absolutely raised my alarm bells. Worst part is, when I tried to get help from the director or other actors, they'd ignore me, or try to tell me that he's just trying to be nice and he can't help it. I blocked and deleted his number, and I'm sad to say I haven't gone back to public theater since, as he's still actively involved in most plays in town. I was going through some stuff in my early 20s and was pretty desperate for any kind of affection, which is the only reason I took a couple weeks to back out of this. The second time I ever met her, she told me to delete every girl's number from my phone, sister included. She then came over to my place, saw I had a bookshelf, and ridiculed me for being a reader, and in the same breath announced that she loved cocaine so much and wanted me to try it. Finally, I escaped, but by then she was already sleeping with two of my friends, who are obviously no longer my friends. The good news is I've now been happily married for 5 years and consider myself so incredibly lucky. When I wasn't allowed to hang out with my male friends in broad daylight, but he thought it was okay to hang out with girls he didn't know in the middle of the night, that was a major red flag. I was dating a really cool guy and everything was going great. And then about a month in, he started talking baby talk to me, and it did not stop. We had been together for quite a while, 6 to 8 months, and lived together for at least 2 months when I decided to make a tuna salad. I asked how he liked it. He told me. I came back with 2 bowls. Half the can made his way, and half the can made the way I liked it. He completely freaked out. He said, "If we can't agree on how to eat tuna, how will this ever work?" I said that we don't have to agree. We can both have it exactly the way we want and be happy. He strongly disagreed. I started thinking of all of his other controlling behavior and inability to compromise. It wasn't that day that we broke up, but it was definitely the day our relationship broke. The cheating didn't help either. Waiters of Reddit, what's the most messed up conversation you've overheard while waiting tables? I was bringing a check for a wealthy local businessman who was dining with his girlfriend. It was a big tab and I was already counting the tip when the woman hurled his drink in his face and yelled to an aghast room of people, "You didn't even pay for the abortion!" and stormed out. The man calmly brushed the ice off of his suit and looked around and said, "Not the first time, won't be the last." I wheeled off and gave him the bill later. I had a couple that came in with their kid. It's slow and we have time to take it slow, so I'm just relaxing there when I see the couple getting into an argument. It's clear from the facial expressions that they're getting into a heated argument. Just as I'm about to come over with the bill, before it got even worse, she throws her drink at his face, throws the food on the ground, and leaves with the kid. He's stranded at the restaurant since she took the car and awkwardly stays here for about an hour. We tried to make him comfortable, but it was incredibly awkward. After he left, the police came to our restaurant about 3 hours later asking if he ate here. Turns out he died that night in a hit and run. St. Patrick's Day, working at a pretty busy bar in San Diego. Waiting on a table of fraternity guys from SDSU. No big deal. I take the order and notice something is seriously off with one of the guys. Not like he was hammered or anything, but he was just making a weird face. The bar was crowded and noisy, so his bros didn't notice it. But I walked up by him and was like, "Are you okay?" He looked at me, pale as a ghost, and said, "I just pooped my pants. It's everywhere. It's in my shoes." Now, as a man who's been there, I felt I had to help out. I also worked security at this place, so grabbed the attention of one of the big Tongan bouncers. Took the bouncer aside, and if you don't know this, Tongans are some of the most helpful people around, and told him the deal as I'm starting to smell and see poop. The next thing I know, the 3 big Tongan doormen come out of nowhere and muscle this guy out, just saying the usual, "Sorry guys, but your friend has to go." They took him in the back and already had a clean pair of boxers and jeans for the guy, and let him clean up in the staff bathroom, and one of them actually gave him a ride home. I was busy and didn't see him leave, but got a cool note from their fraternity the next day and an honorary sweatshirt and a gift certificate to Best Buy. I still have it somewhere. He got to save face with the girls they were with, and they were all regulars after that, and tipped really well. There was this group of 4 elderly women who would come into my family's restaurant once a month. One month, one of them came by herself. I asked, "Hi Edith, where are all your friends?" "They all died." And she broke into tears. I felt like crap the rest of the night. I worked at a high-end bistro during summers in college, and the rule was even if we were closing at 11 and someone came in at 10:59, we served them. So this older, attractive white man in his 60s came in with a small but built Asian guy in his 20s. They sat across each other at a two-top and just ordered wine and dessert. This was pretty typical, and as they were my last table, I could leave after I had bussed their table and tipped out. So I started packing up the silverware and menus at the tables in my section and doing my other closing duties. I was walking by their table and heard they were having a heated yet quiet argument, as if they didn't want to make a scene. I heard snippets of, "No, $600 and you spend the night," by the older male, and "No, $800, blowjob, 1 round of butt stuff, and I leave when I'm done." And I was mentally like, okay, and left them to negotiate alone. Yeah, I would probably do the same thing. Just let them sort out their business. I mean, it's not as if you can chime in on a conversation like that, right? I was a Waffle House waitress for 4 years in high school. I saw and heard quite a bit. I honestly got used to old truckers asking me if I wanted to make an extra tip in the parking lot at the grand old age of 16. But the one time I literally had to say WTF, I didn't even understand the conversation. 2 Latino couples were sharing a booth and seemed to be having a good time. I don't speak Spanish, but nothing in their tone made it seem unusual. Out of nowhere, one of the husbands grabs his wife by the back of her hair, slams her face into the table, and just goes about his conversation. He didn't even look at her. She wiped her face off and just went back to talking and listening. No one batted an eye at the table. I delivered their food a few minutes later, and all 4 of them seemed like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I've called out dozens of customers in my day. You can say pretty much whatever you want as a Waffle House waitress since it's not exactly a classy joint, but I had no idea how to respond to that scenario. I once waited on a couple that broke up while I was waiting on them. They came separately. The wife showed up first. She was very chipper and friendly, and I grabbed her a water while she was waiting on her husband. The husband showed up around 10 minutes later. When I went to the table to grab his drink, I could hear her saying, "What's wrong? What's your deal? Just talk to me." While I was waiting at the bar for his drink, one of the hosts ran up to me and said, "Hey, I think your table's breaking up." I look up to the corner where they're sitting and the wife is sobbing. Now what do? I have to bring him his drink, even though surely they aren't going to stay and eat now, right? Wrong. I brought him his drink, and when I set it down in front of him, expecting him to tell me thanks but no thanks, we're leaving, he says, "Do you know what you want?" Through her tears, she says, "Yes," and orders. What the heck? I have to wait on these people now. I then have one of the most awkward tables of my life, having to keep up my peppy attitude and fake smiles while this poor woman's life is crashing down. When it was all over and I set the bill down in front of the husband, I figured he would at least be kind enough to pay the bill. Alas, he pushed it back to me and said, "Can you separate this, please?" This guy's so brutal, I'm surprised he didn't slide you divorce papers to sign as a witness as well. Not really messed up, but just a complete lack of understanding from a privileged person. I worked at a popular restaurant chain while I was in college. This was about 7 years ago. The owners of one of the largest beer breweries in the country came in to eat. They're sitting there eating and the wife says to the husband, "I don't understand what you mean by living paycheck to paycheck." He explains to her what living paycheck to paycheck actually means in a very respectful and unbiased fashion. She still doesn't get it. She questions why these people don't have any money left over after they pay their bills and why they don't just change that, or why their bills are so high, or why they don't just make more money. They were out to eat with another couple who also tried explaining this to her. A solid 10 minutes were spent on trying to educate this woman on the fact that most people don't live like she's used to. All of them sort of gave up trying when they realized she just didn't get it. You could literally see the confusion on her face. It gave me a new perspective on things. It was the last table of my last shift of my last day at this place. Two top, man and a woman. Both pretty attractive and looking extremely happy to be out on a date together. The meal goes smoothly. They ask for the check. I bring it. Upon returning to grab their credit card, I ask if they'd like me to box up their leftovers. He says sure, and just as I'm leaning in to grab her plate of pasta, she looks him dead in the eye while holding his hand and says, "I'm pregnant." I freeze a bit, then silently carry their plates back to the kitchen. I was so shocked that I was on autopilot mode and accidentally threw their leftovers away. The guy was not very hungry after that anyway. Too bad you threw it away. She's eating for two now, you know. I waited tables and bartended in the late 80s after college. Two ladies sat down at a table in my section. I greeted them and got them water. A man showed up and instantly turned pale. Turns out it was his wife and his girlfriend, and they had found out about each other and set him up. He had his head in his hands the whole time. I didn't hear a lot of what they were saying, but the pieces I did hear were unpleasant. Two guys sitting at my bar top, looking super shady, decided they were going to scout out for ladies. Now, if you've worked in a continuously loud environment, you know that people will say anything when they think you can't hear them. Man, that was stupid. What about the blonde with the blue dress? Nah, I was thinking of that one. He pointed to a smaller one, more fragile looking brunette, sitting by herself. They get quiet for a bit before the first guy asks, "Are you sure you want to do this?" The second guy, "That's what she gets for dressing like that. Let's hope she's parked in the back." I said screw that and called the police. They were asked to leave and one of the officers offered to follow the girl home. Kudos to our original poster on this one because he prevented what could have been a very dangerous situation for this girl. I waited tables at the Olive Garden 10 years ago. Not really messed up as much as it was funny. A guy and his wife sat down at a table and immediately started arguing. Something about his affair and how a baby from it was costing them money. Finally, it culminated as I was bringing out their salad, and as I walked away, I heard the wife say, "Maybe if you hadn't boned our son's girlfriend and gotten her pregnant, we could afford to eat somewhere nicer than Olive Garden. Oh look, the highlight of my meals, unlimited bagged salad. Maybe you could save up and we could go to Joe's Crab Shack for our anniversary." I hate to say it, but maybe this relationship should just come to an end at this point. That sounds like a messed up situation. A waitress at our restaurant, a wealthy but crazy 45-year-old divorcee, was written up 4 times for saying obscene things to guests. The last straw, she gave a plate of food to a man at the bar with a huge mustache and said, "Nice mustache, I'd like to sit on your face," and carried on back to the kitchen as if she'd said nothing at all. You hear a lot of things and I try not to judge, but the two that just stick out in my mind the most are number 1, the first time, please note that's the first, a mother handed me her child's bottle and asked me to fill it with Coke. And number 2 was a table of 3. A mom and her 2 kids, maybe about 7 and 5. She's ignoring me on her phone, not paying attention to anything. The kids are super polite, and I ask what they'd like to drink. And the little girl says, "Can we have some water, please, in the fun cups?" And the mother puts her phone down, snaps at that child, and I swear almost grabs her and says, "No, you'll have a Diet Coke. Get them a Diet Coke." "But Mom, we're thirsty." "Shut it." Kids just wanted some water. I don't understand people. I really don't understand why it had to be Diet Coke over water. Is there some secret added benefit to Diet Coke that I don't know about? People often don't realize that when you're sitting at the bar, the bartenders hear everything. Sometimes I talk with the guests, but sometimes people have really intense and private conversations like less than a meter away from me. I'll just keep my head down and rinse glasses and pour drinks and basically pretend I'm really busy. Just yesterday, there were 2 guys in their early 20s talking about how their girlfriends were total pains who nagged and complained all the time. They drank a lot of tequila and whiskey, and at one point, one guy said to the other, "You should just sleep in my place, you can't drive like this." The other disagreed, and they got into a drunken argument, and at one point the guy who suggested the sleepover grabbed the other guy's face and said, "F you," and then they just started making out. Just out of the blue. Sloppy and drunk making out. It was weird and hilarious. This is my boss's story from when she used to work at a fast food joint. The cashier was a girl who had a short pixie haircut. There was a group of Jehovah's Witnesses that came in and insisted to my manager that they get a different cashier because they don't want any lesbians serving them. The girl was recovering from cancer and has been regrowing her hair. They were immediately kicked out. It was one of the rudest things I've ever heard. I was working as a hostess at a local chain restaurant. The host stand is right next to the bar. There was an older couple, probably in their 70s, eating and having a drink at the bar. They start to walk out with their arms around each other and giggling. Then the woman accidentally drops their box of leftovers. She starts cracking up and says, "I just tossed you a salad." And still with arms around each other, laughing hysterically, they walk out. Made my week. Had to throw in at least one nice story for you guys. Former waitress here. I used to work at a sports bar grill type place that did a pretty good weekday lunch business. One day, I was waiting on a group of guys at a round table having a work lunch. They were discussing business and sharing spreadsheets and things like that. At one point, I was walking up to the table to check on them, and the guy with his back towards me was fiddling with his BlackBerry. And as I get closer, I can see he's watching adult material. Keep in mind, this was long enough ago that internet on phones wasn't nearly as common as it is now, so it was kind of crazy. Dudes carrying on a conversation about financial strategies while watching adult content in the middle of a restaurant. I just got their refills and made sure to approach the table from a different angle when I came back. When I was in the front retail section of a certain country-style chain restaurant, I saw a very young boy studying the toys and gifts while his mother was talking to the hostess. At the time, we had a toy squid with a little propeller that was lazily drifting around the little display tank. Once he saw it, his eyes went wide and he yelled in shock, "That looks just like mommy's toy!" All of the color drained from her face as she ran over, grabbed his wrist, and fled the restaurant, never to be seen again. Way to be subtle, kid. Jeez. I'm German, but live in an Asian country, so it's not very common to meet other people who are German. I was waitressing as a summer job, and one night I was serving this old man who was there with a group of friends. As soon as he sat down, he told his friends in German, "I wouldn't pay $10 to sleep with that slave," talking about one of my Filipino coworkers. I proceeded to continue serving the table the entire night, and the old guy kept on saying more messed up racist stuff about my other Filipino coworkers. When he asked for the bill, I let my coworkers know about the terrible stuff that guy had been saying. The manager, who was also Filipino, confronted him about it, but the old man denied all the allegations. It ended with the racist jerk paying and walking out of the restaurant, stammering to his friend, "How did he know what we were talking about?" I chose that moment to say to them in German with a huge grin, "Good night and thank you for dining with us." Needless to say, the expression on his face was priceless. Sometimes people say really horrible things about other people for no good reason just because they think others can't understand them. It's quite sickening, really. I waited on a table with two young couples on a date. As I approached to clear their table, I overheard them talking about sex. They immediately went quiet once they saw me approach while smirking not too subtly to each other. I asked them if it was good, and they said they enjoyed it greatly. Upon which I asked, "And how was the food?" They erupted in laughter, and I got a very generous tip. Good times. I work as a bartender once a week. Just last night, an attractive couple came in. They honestly already looked halfway smashed. For a while, I thought I heard a faint buzzing noise, but didn't think much of it. As I come up behind them to serve them food, the lady embraced her man and said, "Oh God, turn this thing off before I lose my mind." I understand public displays of affection, but this is just incredibly awkward for anyone else around you. Please don't do this. I used to work at a family burger joint that was part of a large chain. We saw a lot of birthday parties and stressed out parents. This one afternoon, a smallish group came in to celebrate a toddler's birthday. There were 2 couples and 5 kids under the age of 5. Now, anyone getting this table would think, oh no. You're looking at a bunch of kids' meals, which means getting a bunch of drinks and refills for barely any cost and therefore barely any tip. But I figure I'll make this a fun party for them, and maybe they'll leave a nice tip out of gratitude. Yeah, right. The moment I get to this table, one of the women thrusts a bottle at me, saying it's breast milk which she wants me to heat up with hot water. I smile and say no problem. Hungry babies are crying babies, and it's not like I'd be grossed out by breast milk. especially when it's in a bottle. I'm sure she wants the milk quickly, so I hand the job off to my supervisor while I get the other 9 drinks for the table. When I get back to my section with the drink tray, the lady stands up and yells at me, "If you have a problem with someone, why don't you say it to their face?" It took me a moment to realize that she thought I'd handed the milk to my supervisor because I was grossed out by it. "Oh, no," I said. "There's no problem, ma'am. I just knew I'd be a minute with these other drinks and I figured you'd get the milk sooner, so—" "I don't want to hear it. This is terrible customer service and I'm disgusted." Turning to her friends, she told them, still yelling, "I can't even be here anymore. I'm sorry, but this party is ruined. I'm leaving." And she marched out, dragging her now crying children and leaving both my shift leader and I standing agape in the middle of the section. The worst part was, her friends had to try and finish their poor child's birthday party after this. The birthday boy was crying, and his parents looked like they might want to join him. And of course, no apologetic tip or words were forthcoming. Yeah, I hate to say it, but a lot of the times you're not going to get a tip in that situation. They're not going to be in a great mood, meaning they're not going to be feeling very generous towards you. So you get to deal with all that for pretty much nothing. Sorry. I generally try not to eavesdrop on my guests, and at busy times I find myself keeping 5 or 6 different objectives prioritized in my brain, so I don't hear a lot. Every so often, though, a certain word or turn of phrase will make it through and capture my attention. The most recent of these that comes to mind was a lady I'd guess to be in her mid-20s who, completely straight-faced, told her dining partner, "No, seriously, dead is way better than broken up. At least with dead, I know where he is and what he's up to." That's a little concerning. Maybe you should have called the police. I walked up to the table with a young newly married couple. They seemed to be in conversation, but I was busy, so I didn't have time to wait for them to finish. As soon as I walked up, I heard the girl say, "If you ever lie to me again, I swear to God I will poop on your pillow." There was an awkward pause before I said, "Hi, what can I get y'all to drink?" I worked at a fine dining restaurant during college, overlooking the lake, white tablecloths, $300 bottle of wine, the whole bit. One night, the matriarch of a family company that is incredibly wealthy and well-known came in with some of the company's executives. It's my table, but a large one. So one of our male servers, I'm female, was helping me take initial drink orders. The entire group ignores me and speaks only to him. My first clue that maybe this isn't going to go well. But whatever, that's fine. Maybe they're just confused about who the lead server is. I pop out to the bar to start getting their drinks from the bar staff. And while I'm out there, our maitre d' comes up to me, "Your table has requested that male server to be the one to take care of them." Ouch. Okay, there goes the money I'm gonna make tonight, but okay. Later, I'm walking past their table with a few dirty dishes in my hands, and I hear the matriarch say, "Now there's her proper place." This was in 2011. About a month ago, I served a couple that was celebrating their 30th anniversary. They were dressed to the nines and looking very happy together. I offered to take a picture of them when I saw them awkwardly attempting a selfie. I shot a few pictures and handed her the phone pack. When I went to take his empty plate, I noticed he had kind of a frantic look on his face, but I couldn't gauge the situation. Turns out, the phone was his, not hers. 5 minutes later, she's flipping out about a girl named Candy, who he was apparently texting during their anniversary dinner. Dude obviously didn't care at all. They end up in an all-out brawl, with everyone in the restaurant watching. Needless to say, I got stiffed for the $110 check, and I'm sure he'll always blame me for getting caught.
Forensic scientists, what is the most WTF case that you ever had? A friend of mine is a CSI, and I don't know if he's posted here, but just in case he hasn't, I'll put this here. Anchorage, Alaska, 2008. A 27-year-old woman hasn't paid her rent in 4 months. The landlord gave her a bit of a reprieve because he knew she was very poor and she was in a low-income housing. But after 4 months of zero contact, enough is enough, and he calls the cops to get into her place and either see her to talk or change the locks and remove her stuff to a storage shed so the apartment can be released to someone else. The cops find the front door to be bolted and use the landlord's key to get in, then find the woman dead in her shower, just sort of slumped as if she fell against the wall and slid down. The water wasn't on, and as this is Alaska and in the winter, the water is never shut off by the city because if hot water isn't moving through the pipes, they freeze and burst. The fact that her shower is off means she never turned it on or someone turned it off. The body is taken to the morgue and autopsied at the family's request because no obvious means of death can be found. As far as the examination could conclude, she died from from an adrenal surge causing her heart to stop, more commonly known as frightened to death, which yes, can actually happen in some rare cases. The body was old, but no test showed any residual illegal substances in her system. None were found in the apartment, nor was there any sign of anyone having entered or left before the cops. The young, pretty average health woman appears to have gotten into her shower, and then her heart stopped due to terror. As far as I know, that's where the story ends. No substantial evidence. When I was pretty young, I got into all of the procedural crime shows and stuff like CSI, Law and Order, just all those things, so I'm kind of interested in this topic. A friend of mine is a forensic scientist, and her department dealt with burglary cases only, usually generating pretty uninteresting stuff to tell people. But her only good story is that once she got a pair of gloves found at a crime scene. She went to examine them and felt that there was something hard inside. She turned the gloves up to get it out, and out falls a thumb, ripped off at the first joint. Apparently, this particular burglar was holding up a safe while his mate went underneath it, dropped the safe on his hand, ripped his hand out, and ran. They obviously caught the guy. The only interesting story they have, kind of rude, but I wonder if whoever caught them was like, so, was it worth it? A friend is a psychologist whose previous life was in crime scene photography. She went to the scene of a self-deletion in a garage. This guy had a project car that he worked on his whole life. When he decided to end it all, he wanted to go with the car. So he shut the garage and turned on the engine and waited. To top it off, he had taken a bunch of pain and sleeping pills. When my friend got there, it was a good while after his death. EMTs and other specialists were there looking for details and whatnot. He was the VP of a fairly large chain of local businesses, so there was an insurance settlement to consider. My friend is in the middle of photographing the scene, and the guy was laying there, pronounced dead hours ago, and he suddenly just shook hard. She thought it was a death rattle, so she kept taking pictures. Eventually, the guy sat up and nodded, and the EMTs were called back in to stabilize him and eventually save him. Apparently, the car had run out of gas right at the moment he went out, and he was pronounced dead on the scene. He couldn't talk or do much, but he had actually survived. I don't know what the laws are in Alaska. I was gonna say he was lucky, but then I thought about the fact that he's probably being arrested for attempting self-deletion. Forensic chemist here, who occasionally gets called out to crime scenes just to consult on evidence collection. On the first one I ever went on, a father had killed his adult son and put the body in a deep freeze that was in his bedroom. There were a ton of cops and the other people from our lab there, but when the coroner asked for help removing the body from the freezer, I volunteered quickly, as I had never been that close to a dead body, other than funerals, and was curious. As I helped the coroner lift the body out of the freezer, which still had a bunch of food in it too, a pack of frozen biscuits was stuck to his body. I had to pry them off of him, which was both very weird and kind of funny at the same time. I often ponder, like so many other people do, what my final moments will define me as in the face of those who know and love me, as well as strangers who may be there to witness my downfall or whatever. And there are people who obviously you know and care about, who love you, that will remember you fondly, and then there are people like this who are just like, oh yeah, that guy who got biscuits stuck to him. Tragic story though. EMT here. We had a guy who was naked, bloodied, and tortured, then left outside in -10-degree weather until he froze. We found him literally frozen maybe a day after the fact. Now, my question is, how the hell do you move a 230-pound popsicle without breaking it? Very, very carefully, I imagine? I interned at the office of the chief medical examiner when I was 18, saw a lot of interesting stuff, learned a lot of interesting things. One case stuck with me more than the rest. I arrived one morning, went down to the basement where bodies were laid out for rounds every morning. On tables lay the usual, a couple of folks who died in the hospital and needed a partial autopsy to sign off on a death certificate, an illegal substance overdose, an illegal substance murder. Then, on one table, there was a blue Tupperware bin, a big one, about 3 by 3 by 2. It was filled with concrete, and out of the edges a little plastic wrap was lining between the concrete and the bin. And then, out of the top of the concrete, a couple of toes were poking out. The story was, out in the country, a family saw a small fire in the woods outside of their house. They called the fire department, and after putting out the flames, they found this bin. When we cracked the bin open, we found half of a man, about from the belly button down. Someone had thought the best way to dispose of this body would be to cut it in half, wrap it in plastic, put it in a Tupperware bin, fill the bin with concrete, and set it on fire. What they had really done was essentially cook the body in an oven with the plastic wrap acting as a roasting bag. Skin was sloughing off of the legs and feet, and the skin was discolored by this time, a nice green. Though this was about 10 years ago, I still distinctly remember being able to make out saw marks on the top edge of this half, however. Notes were taken and no signs of death were found on the legs and no indication of the person's identity either. Unfortunately, my internship ended a few weeks before they found the top half, so I never got to learn more about the case, but the image still certainly sticks with me till now. I once considered doing an internship at a morgue myself, but you know what? Some of the things you'd see in there would probably just, like they said, stick with you for the rest of your life, or at least a really long time. I'm not a forensic scientist, but did forensic anthropology as part of my degree. When handling a rib cage, a ton of flakes came off and ended up lodged in my mouth, nose, and eyes thanks to a friend. Yummy, flaky rib cage bits. Forensic genetic in Mexico. I've seen some serious stuff. I was assigned to the identification of mass graves, over 300 bodies, dismembered, scattered, and burnt. It was just one site. We had many. I'm gonna presume that's the work of the cartels. Stepfather used to be a police officer and loves telling stories about crime scenes. He went on to tell us about how after a motorcycle rider was struck by a train, he went under the wheel. His torso was found about 30 feet from his legs. They were connected by an intestine, so he picked up one end of the intestine and started to wrap it up like a rope. I defer back to the young man who had frozen biscuits stuck to his dead body. Just imagine that. You're dead on the floor and some guy's just wrapping up your intestines like he's putting away the garden hose. It's a rather surreal thought. My cousin is a coroner and the worst was he came to get a body in a trailer during the summer. Man had been dead at least a week and it burst. He said the smell was the worst of his life. He and the other guys were up to their ankles in fluids and had to throw out his clothes and shoes. His boss felt so bad that he bought them each a new pair of like $300 shoes. I was literally watching Seven last night. It's a film with young Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Do not recommend it for the faint of heart. And that's what I'm picturing. Like the crime scenes in it are super gritty and horrible. Like you would not want to be there. And that's what I'm imagining this trailer as. Not me, but there was a great case that I can't currently find on Google. I hope it was true. A woman was found dead in her bed with blood everywhere, and I mean everywhere. There were wine glasses or drinking glasses throughout the house with blood in them. I think blood may have been smeared about as well. So the investigators assumed some bizarre ritual, a gang of people, the whole 9 yards. Long story short, she had some strange clotting problems and was bleeding out of her mouth for an extended period of time. She probably got hazy from the loss of blood and was just trying not to make a mess in her house, so she kept spitting the blood in glasses. Eventually, she was overcome and died in her bed. I only hope it was true because I don't want to propagate lies. I was about to say out of context the whole I hope it's true is a bit weird. I did an internship at a PD one year. I got to be with a forensic team for a week. I got to see the aftermath of what a stabbing looks like. A 113 stab wound aftermath. Yes, 113 is correct. Unreal amounts of blood. I used a kitchen knife. Upon first inspection, it appeared like a dozen because there was so much blood on the body they couldn't tell how many there actually was. Gruesome. I actually personally know someone who was almost decapitated in a similarly excessive and brutal way. They survived and they were a very nice person. They moved away a good long while ago and, well, I hope they're doing well. I regularly post on Unsolved Mysteries, so I thought this was fitting here. One of the best cases on Forensic Files was a cold case that had gone unsolved for decades. A man told police he had picked up a hitchhiker in the evening. After the man and the hitchhiker got into a fight, the man threw him out of his car 2 miles away from his mother's house on a busy highway. The man later came home to his mother's house only to find the hitchhiker at his mother's house. He left to go call the police from a payphone. This was before cell phones. The police found his mother dead in bed. The man was a beneficiary of a huge life insurance policy and was the prime suspect. The cops or anyone did not believe the man's story. It was inconceivable that the hitchhiker, who did not know where the mother's house was, could make a 2-mile journey which turns in a neighborhood to just randomly break in and kill the man's mother who he didn't know. But there was blood at the scene and a palm print on the staircase that was not the man's nor the mother's. After some investigation, people at Hardee's did confirm that there was a man that fit the description looking to hitchhike. Still, they just assumed the man had paid the other man to kill his mother. 15 years later, after the invention of CODIS, the DNA was matched to a career criminal who definitely matched the description of the hitchhiker. After bringing him in and interrogating him, the killer had no idea he had killed the mother of the man who gave him a ride. He simply walked through this neighborhood looking for a house that looked empty, and his mother's was the only one without the lights on. It's baffling. It also sounds like just plain awful luck. I was at a regional medical center in rural Guatemala when we had a case come in from an RTA, road traffic accident, involving a pedestrian and a chicken bus. For those who don't know, a popular but incredibly dangerous form of public transport are retired American school buses that have been painted all sorts of vibrant colors, but underneath, the mechanics are shot to hell. Anyway, this pedestrian had been hit by one of these rolling death traps, which was fully loaded going around 80 miles per hour and ended up getting wrapped under the front right wheel arch and completely mangled beyond recognition. They found bits of this guy spread 2 kilometers down the road, and the initial impact had split his torso down the middle and basically turned him inside out. When all the bits had been collected, the height of the body bag was around 2 inches, so you can imagine the state of the remains. Passers-by helped us pick up bits from the side of the road, but dogs and cats ran off with a fair amount of the smaller bits. Guatemala is a cool place. First of all, I also never heard of a chicken bus. I assumed it was literally that, a bus for chickens to be transported to wherever chickens need be. Second of all, my God, he was bloody... there's barely anything left of him if that's the case. Not a forensic scientist, but I majored in anthropology, with a focus on forensic anthropology. Given that, I was a fairly regular reader of the Forensic Science Quarterly. Here are a couple that I remember. Kid found on top of an elevator in a 6-story dorm. Apparently, he was elevator surfing, which is just as dumb as it sounds. He somehow got his head caught in the cables and got it twisted around a couple of times. This did not immediately kill him. He died from asphyxiation, which means he had anywhere from 30 to a couple of minutes to contemplate what had happened to him before he lost consciousness. Another one was sort of a mystery case. Headless corpse found in a truck in a national park. No head was to be found in the immediate area. Truck was turned on but had run out of gas. The wound was very clean, no sawing, almost like a guillotine cut. The investigating authorities were rather confused, but eventually they found a receipt in his pocket for 50 yards of nylon rope. They widened the investigation and eventually found the rope tied to a tree with a noose at the end. Further searching of this area eventually turned up the head. Pretty unique method of self-deletion. Mystery solved. This one isn't from the magazine, but a story personally relayed to me from the officer involved. A call comes in for a 50-ish black woman dead in a garage. Investigation reveals it is actually a 35-year-old white male. Dude put on a dress, rigged a noose to his garage door opener, and proceeded to watch some smut in his garage while choking himself with the garage door opener. Battery in the remote died, and then so did he. I am reminded of an episode of BoJack Horseman. I had a professor who was an expert in osteology and would train radiologists and doctors to recognize defensive fractures in arm bones. Defending yourself from an attack can leave a very distinctive spiral fracture on your forearm, and in his years of research, he'd never encountered that specific fracture pattern anywhere except in a defensive wound. Until he was attending a seminar at the University of Toronto in February, and when leaving the lecture, he was walking down an outdoor flight of stairs when someone called out to him to ask a question. He had his hands in his pockets because he wasn't wearing gloves, turned, slipped, and fell while perpendicular to the steps. His forearm hit the step and resulted in the exact spiral fracture he'd never seen anywhere else. And best part is that the radiologist that examined him was someone he himself trained to look for this sort of fracture as a warning sign for domestic violence. I'm picturing the dude who fell goes in, his student or former student, the radiologist examines him and is like, "Sir, has your wife been hitting you?" A bit late, but this is my area, so why not go for it? I'm in third year as a forensic anthropology student, so I don't have my own cases yet, but I've studied hundreds and have been told about some. My professor in advanced forensic methods was one of the leads in the case of Anthony Hardy, who basically killed people, dismembered them, and put their body parts in bins that were eventually found by a homeless guy. Another one she worked on, actually all I'm going to list were ones she was involved with, involved a man who went to park his car in his garage as he normally did, but his wife's car was in the spot. She refused to move it, so naturally, he stabbed her about 17 times, put her in his boot, and drove off. He explained the bloodstains away as being animal blood of something he'd hit, carried home in his boot, and cut it up on the garage floor. Obviously, this was a crap excuse, as simple blood testing showed it was human. She ran us through the forensics involved in that case, and it was quality stuff. One was a man found with his wrist and throat cut sitting on the floor of his living room. Depressed old man. Self-deletion, right? Wrong. The cut to his throat stopped halfway across and was at an unusual angle. The stopping halfway through is a good sign of holding someone from behind, reaching around and slitting the throat. Stopping halfway is in that position, it's much harder to fight a struggle. Also, the wrist wound had very little blood and was evidently done after the throat slit. The way he was sat showed that it was likely a loved one, as his body was taken care of, as strange as that sounds, and placed in a loving position. Possibly the weirdest one, a woman was found dead in the hole at the bottom of the stairs with blunt force trauma to the skull. There was a large hole in the ceiling above her, and the situation told to the forensic team by the police is that she fell through the loft. In the loft, no boxes were moved and there were loads around the site of the hole. If she fell, she would have grabbed out, right? More damning, it was clear, by some sawdust in the state of the slats, that someone had used a saw to cut through the wood. Also, the blood splatter on the wall was all wrong. Basically, what had happened was that her husband had smashed her head in, put her at the bottom of the stairs, cut a hole in the loft, called the police and told them of the accident. He also tried to kill the family liaison officer in the kitchen when the police were there after he realized the jig was up. Seen a lot more stuff than that. Self-deletions that look like murders but no evidence found, vice versa, bodies found in burnt buildings, bodies found in swamps or moors from years back, terrible labs for the production of illegal substances, even got sort of taught how to make illegal substances actually. Mass graves, photos, grapes, murder victims, it's pretty grim at times. I'm just picturing the dude who left his wife at the bottom of the stairs and everything thinking, oh yeah, I'm smart, I'm real smart, I'm like a Columbo villain. From a family friend, people who do lots of yoga involving rolling their heads around the axis of their neck, over time it wears away the corners of the vertebrae, which is why you're not supposed to do it. He saw a few cases of people getting into relatively minor car crashes. What should have been a nasty case of whiplash instead becomes fatal, as their spine was weakened and can't stop the momentum of their head. So it just pops right off of the spinal column. The head doesn't fly away or anything, it's still held on by muscle, but the driver is just as dead. I gotta be honest, through all of the violent descriptions of the things that happen to people in this, I'm just getting like a blast of like the x-rays from Mortal Kombat or something of whatever I'm describing. It's crazy. I'm not even a Mortal Kombat fan. I'm more of a Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue guy. Hell, if you catch me in the right mood, I might want to play Dead or Alive more than friggin' Mortal Kombat. An ex-journalist once told me the story that got him out of journalism. He covered a story where there was a house fire. Police suspected arson. Then they discovered the body of a young girl in the house. It was not the owner's, but a local girl whose mom was a junkie. Turned out that the mother was pimping her daughter out to the owner. Some local residents knew he was a nonce and set fire to his house, killing him and the girl. That's just sad. I mean, I don't give a crap what happens to a nonce, but the kid, oh man. I'm a wound researcher, currently specializing in genetic changes along wound healing phases. Forensics does a lot of research into this, as the progression of a wound reveals a lot about time of death, conditions, etc. Prior to this, I had worked with cadavers and stuff, majored in neuropsych, preemed roots, so lots of bloody stuff. I thought that I had a low squeamish index, as I see most stuff as a part of life. Holy crap, these studies I am reviewing right now. Apparently, a lot of people have massive chronic wounds that go untreated for a long time because they're diabetic, and A, don't have the proper vasculature for proper nociceptor function, and B, don't care enough about their bodies. So forensics can help differentiate whether a wound existed prior to death or not, and studies also look at different subpopulations to show wound progression in general, and some studies show graphic pictures to depict this. Seeing a morbidly obese man's leg split open like a wilted banana peel put me off work for a day. I couldn't crop the picture out and I scrapped the paper from consideration because the images comparing injury progression and chronic wound changes post-death were full of the most messed up diabetic wounds. I get that it's not a grisly murder, but I can handle that sort of stuff. I feel empathy for combat wound research I cover, and I don't recoil from any of those cases. Pressure ulcers don't flinch me. But diabetic wounds? I need to get back into brains. I checked some of the examples of wounds that this individual talked about, and yeah, they're all pretty gross. And yeah, the diabetic wounds are pretty damn bad.
Worked a burglary one time where a homeowner left in the morning and came back to discover their house had been broken into during the day. Normal things were stolen, electronics, cash, jewelry, etc. But what was left behind is a head scratcher. The burglar took a dump on the toilet seat cover and then covered it nearly with a towel. The victim wanted it collected for DNA processing. Nope. Forensics swabbed it and left it for the homeowners to handle. I gave them some latex gloves and wished them luck. Full disclosure, I'm a cop, not forensics.
Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the craziest rule or punishment you had to deal with? When I was in first grade, I had a writing homework assignment. My dad used to be weird about me erasing because he wanted me to do it right the first time. I ended up erasing a lot on this homework, and my dad took the paper from me, ripped it in half, and told me to start over. Turns out it was the last sheet of paper in the entire house, and I don't remember why, but for some reason we couldn't go and buy more paper that night. So, ironically, I ended up having to completely erase an old homework assignment in order to have a sheet of paper to start over on. I'm 22 now and still give him crap about this. How is starting over on a new piece of paper any different than erasing what you were already doing? I don't really understand the logic on this one. The word disgusting was banned and could have been considered just as bad as saying the F word. We weren't allowed to close doors unless we were in the bathroom. We weren't allowed to watch Cartoon Network because it was garbage. They actually put a parental lock on Cartoon Network. The worst punishment was one time they decided that we were such bad kids, my sister was like 14 and I was 12-ish, that they took everything we owned and bagged it up into garbage bags and made us carry them out to a burn pile, and they burnt everything we owned. All of my childhood memorabilia, pictures, clothes, diaries, everything. All of it burnt. It was kind of messed up. When it was done burning, the next day or so later, my sister and I looked through the ashes, and all that was left were 2 silver rings of hers that we cleaned off and kept. It was kind of crazy. I once got beaten and locked in the basement because my hands were literally not large enough to play a certain piano piece. I couldn't play an octave separation yet. Before you ask, yes, I am Asian. I didn't ask, but makes sense. I wasn't allowed to use public restrooms. I ruined our Disney trip because of how many times we had to go back to the hotel, which wasn't on site. And I was 6 years old at the time. I quite honestly had accidents when I was far too old to do so because my parents had my teachers reporting bathroom use to them too. There was no place I could safely use the restroom other than home. Without getting into trouble, that is. Finally, I got to use public restrooms without punishment when I went to college. No, I'm not kidding. But I got pretty good at hiding restroom use in high school because the high school refused to report it to my parents. Why did none of these teachers spot the abuse? My parents once grounded me for 2 years for getting a B on my report card. Took everything out of my room besides the bed, and I wasn't allowed to do anything with friends. A year and a half into it, I asked if I could be ungrounded. And at that point, they'd actually forgotten what they'd grounded me for, but refused because I must have done something bad if they grounded me. Also, they refused to let me stay up past 8 p.m., even in high school. If it's not important enough for you to remember, then it's not important enough to take away all of your kids' stuff for 2 whole years. When I was in elementary school at about 6 years old, I used to have accidents because my bladder was too small. My mom would punch me in the bladder when I got home to make me pee myself and make fun of me when I did. I still have issues, and it turns out that my bladder and uterus is messed up from a genetic disease. That's actually just messed up. No talking at the dinner table other than the occasional "do you want some more blank" or "pass the blank." We couldn't talk about anything at all. No small or idle chat was allowed. First time you did it, you got yelled at. Second time was a whooping and then sent to your room until the next day, without the rest of your meal. I make it a point now with my kids to chat up a storm each and every meal. You could earn a full-on whooping for uttering any of the following: shut up, but, or accusing someone of lying for any reason. We were not permitted to use the words lie, liar, or lying. Instead, we had to say, "That's not the truth," or "That doesn't sound right," or any other phraseology that wasn't some iteration of the word lie. This sounds like there's some deeper damage going on in your parents' psyche around the word lie. Otherwise, I don't see why they'd be so sensitive about the word. As the eldest son of a Southern Baptist preacher, I was held to some high standards. Being seen and not heard, and that my every action was a reflection of my father as a leader to his congregation. I found music to be a great outlet, but of course any non-Christian music was not allowed and immediately destroyed upon discovery. Spare the rod, spoil the child was a mantra ingrained in my daily life. Once I was into my teens and spankings with stretched out coat hangers was no longer enough to be considered punishment due to the lack of tears, my father moved on to shaving my head. Nothing like the constant reminder of how untrustworthy one is once their physical source of personal identity is forcibly removed. As soon as you said Southern Baptist preacher, I knew this was going to be bad. My mother is an honest-to-God narcissist. I graduated from high school early at 16 and didn't go to college immediately, so I worked a part-time job while all my friends went to school. Anyways, when all my friends graduated high school, we celebrated by going to the movies. My friend's mom dropped us off and another friend's father was going to be picking us up. My mom was very upset at me going to the movie anyways, since it wasn't going to be over until after 9 p.m., by bedtime at the time. Anyways, finally she lets me go on the condition that my friend's dad gets me home by 10 p.m. My friend's father ran into late night construction on the way home with me and several other friends in the van, and the closer it got to 10 p.m., the more I started freaking out, telling everyone I was going to be in huge trouble if I didn't get home like right now. My friend's father assured me he would speak to my mom and all would be fine. I was the first to be dropped off because I was panicking so severely. The moment the van pulls into the driveway, my mom comes barreling out of the house, telling me she was going to kick my butt for being late and keeping her up. My friend's dad tried to calm her down and separate her from hitting me. That's when she realizes I'm chewing gum. Now, my mother hated gum. Said the only reason you would ever chew gum was to hide something. So naturally, she makes the assumption I was late and chewing gum because I was busy fooling around with my friend's dad. Yeah, that was the only explanation in her mind. She grounded me for 12 weeks, an entire summer. I wasn't allowed to have a phone, cell phone, TV, or books the entire summer. Every morning, my mom would take the cable box, home phone handset, and keyboard to make sure I couldn't do anything. Needless to say, my friends never invited me anywhere again in fear that my mom would call the cops and accuse me of fooling around with their dad. She also used to report my car stolen if I didn't call her back when I was in college. What's going on with your mom that's the first thing that her mind goes to? Who does she think you are? Shouldn't she be more confident in how she raised you? I dealt with a narcissistic and abusive mother, and most of my punishments weren't huge because I was a really good kid. But on my 18th birthday, because I asked for gas money the day before, the first time ever, she took mine and her car keys with her to work, and took the shed key so I couldn't even ride my bike. She left a note on the kitchen table saying, "Happy 18th, now you're an adult, so get out of my house." I spend my birthday alone, trapped, and miserable. All over $10. One day, the news said the school might be closed for a cold day, like a snow day, but when it's cold enough, your exposed skin freezes in less than 10 minutes. My mom demanded I start walking to school or she'd report me to the cops as truant. We argued about it, but the TV said school started late that day. I decided to go anyways. That being better than the arguing. She then decided I was to stay home for her to call the cops. I shoved past her, which she yelled at me was assault, and then locked me out of the house. Halfway to school, I was told the school was closed. I had to call my dad to be let into the house again. That day, I promised myself I'd leave home as soon as possible. I've stayed halfway across the country from my mom ever since. Your mom sounds like the type of person that's just looking for and wants to start problems. I don't blame you for wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. My mom was raised in a very strict and abusive environment. When my sister and I became teenagers, she was struggling with mental health issues and also never had a good example of what level-headed parenting looked like. It doesn't excuse some of the things she did, but I'm more understanding now that I'm older. Anyway, the craziest, most out-of-hand moment. My sister and I are 16 months apart in age and had a lot of the same friends in high school. When I was 14 and she was 15, our curfew was 9, but we got a summertime curfew of 10 o'clock. This was before everyone had a cell phone. Our friend was watching the time, but we got caught up in our night games. We were literally playing hide and seek. We lost track of time and realized at 5 after 10 that we were late, and managed to get home by 10 after. My mom was furious and made us sit down at the kitchen table for a 30-minute lecture, during which she slammed a utensil so hard on a plate in front of my sister that glass shards flew into her face. My sister got up and left the room at that point, but when I tried to do the same, my mom put me in a headlock, like freaking WWE style, and I punched her in the back to get her to let go. My sister and I were both grounded for something like 2 weeks, and I got an extra week for hurting my mom. The most ridiculous punishment? My sister at age 16 picked up smoking cigarettes. She'd been at it for a week. I told her it was on her own head and that it wasn't worth it and she should stop, but she kept doing it. Whatever, not my problem. She, like an idiot, pressed her luck and brought cigarettes into the house, where my mom found them in her room. Our mom would go through our stuff constantly. I literally had to hide any CD with profanity or things like permanent markers that we could get high off of. They separated us and played good cop, bad cop. My sister, again, the idiot, totally bought it when my mom told her I'd blabbed about everything and they knew the truth. I was in the other room denying any knowledge or involvement. Anyway, this happened a week before summer vacation. My sister was grounded for the entire summer vacation. 2 months, no friends, no going out, 10 minutes of phone time a day, no electronics, no internet, no pool, no movie theater, nothing. My punishment? The exact same thing. For not coming to my parents and telling on my sister. My parents also decided to sand and paint the baseboards that summer and forced us to do it all. That summer was literally the worst. I spent a large portion of my teen years being grounded for minor things, or for not being the sister spy. It sucked, especially considering I got decent if not great grades, never drank, smoked, tried drugs, had sex, skipped class, or otherwise got into any kind of trouble. I'm almost 30 and about to have my second kid, and I'm still a little salty about it. My parents tried so hard to keep us from experiencing normal teenage stuff that both me and my sister made some really poor choices once we had the tiniest amount of freedom. That's something I think a lot of parents aren't aware of, is that the harder you push, the harder they pull away. You're gonna be this super strict about your kid, then yeah, the second they have some freedom, they're gonna go nuts. And they don't know how to control themselves because they've never gotten to enjoy fun before. It makes sense that they're gonna get a little carried away. No TV. Not as a punishment, just no TV, ever. Because apparently it lets the devil in. The second I, as the last kid, moved out, they started watching TV all the time. As punishment, my dad would make us face a corner, stand on one leg, and keep both arms straight up in the air for a certain length of time. If our leg or arms went down, he'd double the time. Sometimes he'd give you a surprise visit from his belt or shoe if he was particularly angry. At least I grew up to have fantastic balance. My grandmother was a retired English teacher. One day, I called my brother stupid. I was 4 or so. She filled me in on her rule that if I couldn't spell stupid, but I called someone stupid, then it was really me that was stupid. Thus, I should never call someone a name that I couldn't spell. So, in my 4-year-old head, rather than avoid name calling, I realized that I did know how to spell the word dumb. So that word must be permitted. I spent the rest of the day overusing the word dumb, and she wasn't quite sure what to do at that point. My mom gave me a black eye one night when I came home from a friend's birthday party at a skate rink. She made me tell people that I fell down and got hit in the eye by one of the wheels on a skate. I was 12. It was because I forgot to put away the dishes before I left. She also regularly broke remote controls, throwing them at me, would slam my doors open so hard the doorknobs would smash through the drywall, stole the allowance my granddad gave me, no matter where I hid it, and recently ripped a pair of my headphones out of my ears while I was using them and broke them by repeatedly whipping me in the face with them, then followed it up by punching me a few times in the face. The last instance was about 4 to 5 months ago. I moved out and she regularly contacts me demanding money. I really hope you aren't giving her any money, my friend. We weren't allowed to have food upstairs, but I had food wrappers in my trash can, so they searched my whole room, ripping clothes off hangers, throwing stuff out of drawers, etc. And for 3 months, I wasn't allowed in my room for anything, unless accompanied by one of them. I had to sleep on the couch. I don't understand how parents can take stuff to such an extreme and still think that they're doing right by their child. I have a literal book worth of stories of the abuse I survived through, but one time Dr. Phil's show told my mother that having a bed was a luxury for kids, so she immediately took mine away. I slept on a cold wood floor until I escaped that hellhole and cut off all contact. My dorm in college was the first real bed I'd slept in for 10 years. I didn't own a bed when I moved into my first apartment after college, so I was back on the wood floor. I'd moved in with the clothes on my back, my cat and her stuff, and my laptop, which I used to make money by transcribing at night while I worked for $7 an hour, 12 hours a week at a deli. It was the only place that would hire me since I didn't have access to my own car. I cried myself to sleep every night on that wood floor. It was a reminder of how much I'd failed, leaving myself back in that position. My roommate must have heard me crying one night and figured it was back pain, because they lent me an air mattress to sleep on. It was like I'd moved into a 4-star hotel. Eventually, I saved up a spare $50 and bought a bed off Craigslist. Sketchy, but I hadn't owned my own bed in 16 years before that. I still have the bed and refuse to part with it because I don't want to end up on the floor again. I have many chronic back problems that I don't think will ever be fixed due to being forced to sleep on the floor starting at age 7. I take pain meds when I can and do yoga, but it doesn't help. Sometimes when I can't sleep in my normal bed, I find myself defaulting to the floor. When I wake up, I cry because I'm worried I'll always be like this. Parents have no idea how much they can mess up their kids. Ah yes, Dr. Phil. Responsible for a good amount of parental abuse, I'm pretty sure. This one time, I didn't want to finish drinking my milk, so my dad threw the cup across the room, shattering it and getting milk everywhere, while he proceeded to flip my chair over while I was still in it. He then crouched over my body saying, "You want to mess with me?" a bunch and stormed out telling me to clean up the mess. And just lots more stuff like that. I once said whatever to my dad in a Bubba Gump's restaurant on vacation in Hawaii. He proceeded to scream at me and yelled at me to get out of the restaurant. I just sat there, mortified, and he left instead. I got grounded from an end-of-the-year party when I was 11 for getting a B on a paper, even though I still got all A's. I was devastated. It was thrown by my best friend, and I was never allowed to do anything, and I'd been looking forward to it all year. I had the perfect dress to wear because my aunt's mother had taken me shopping and bought this cool dress that made me feel like Molly Ringwald. I had never been allowed to wear it before, and it had been in my closet since September. I was seriously having a Cinderella moment, although I honestly related more to Jane Eyre because I was adopted and a bookworm. The day of the party comes around and I'm bawling. I'm a good kid. I try to be perfect every waking moment. Now I'm grounded from my best friend's party. The mom of my best friend knows how tough it is at home. I'm screamed at, belittled, hit all the time. This party was a beacon. My friend's mom barges into my house, tells me to get ready and get my stuff together because I'll be spending the night. My mom protests. How about I call CPS about the 50 cats in your house? I end up going to the party and she teaches me to be a badass. I had all the usual punishments. No video games for a week, no TV for X nights, no pocket money this week, groundings, you name it, I probably had it at one point or another. One particular punishment tops the rest though for creativity and cruelty. One day I was at a friend's place with my parents and discovered that if we opened his bedroom window all the way, we could squeeze out of it and climb onto his roof. His bedroom was on the second floor of their house, and they lived on top of a hill. So if we had fallen, we would have fallen probably 7 to 8 meters and then tumbled another 20 to 30 to the bottom of the hill. Anyway, both sets of parents walk outside at one point and hear us talking from the roof. They flip their lids and call us back inside. We scramble back into his bedroom and are sitting there terrified when our parents storm in. We get called down into the kitchen and are told to sit down at the kitchen table and await our punishment. My friend's dad opens up the pantry and starts pulling things out to make a sandwich. Then it hits us like a ton of bricks. Our punishment is to eat a sandwich made of the most ill-complementing, grotesque food combinations that he had at his disposal. The final product ended up being an unholy blend of Vegemite, oysters, anchovies, cheese, creamed corn, raw beef mince, and hot English mustard. I actually don't recall what it tasted like, other than being awful. Looking back on it as an adult, I reckon it was just as much for their entertainment than our punishment. But damn if it wasn't creative. For me, it was always the wooden spoon. I got the wooden spoon until I was probably 15. Then, when my mom broke it over my backside because I wouldn't stop laughing, she moved to the metal one. Standing in the corner was another big one. My youngest sister got smart though and would get the corner where she could see the TV. So that was exchanged for flat walls on your knees, Malcolm in the Middle style. Another weird one I got was when my sister and I wouldn't stop fighting, my mom made us sit next to each other holding hands and not speaking for hours on end. I couldn't drink water from my bathroom. My bathroom genuinely had colder water, and the best water in the house. My mom got suspicious when I'd leave to my bathroom for a few seconds every few minutes. I don't know what she possibly thought I was doing with it, but no more bathroom water, and I had to drink lukewarm peasant water like the rest of my family. This one's pretty tame, but honestly just doesn't make sense. Who cares if that's the water they want to drink? I also agree bathroom water, for whatever reason, tends to be better than kitchen water. I grew up the firstborn son of an officer in the Air Force in the Bible Belt. I was an extremely inquisitive child, and mentioned anything weird I found that didn't make sense in the Bible, resulting in a beating either with a belt or a wooden spoon with my pants down. I wasn't allowed to play Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything, as it was all satanic. So, of course now I play a boatload of Japanese card games and escapist video games, listen to obnoxious screaming noises, and have a healthy interest in European occultism. Go me, I guess.
Men, what's the most creepy thing a woman has ever done to you? Enraged in the middle of the argument, she took my fish out of the aquarium and threatened to step on it. I saved the little guy. It was a beta, if you want to know. Takes anger out on small creatures. That right there, my friend, is a red flag. Cut off all of her pubic hair, put them in between layers of scotch tape, crammed them in an envelope with a pair of her used panties, and put the envelope under my windshield wiper. There was a note that read something like, "I know we can't be together, but now you'll always remember me." She was right. It's already been stated what she was trying to accomplish. I just can't fathom as to why she came up with that. Probably not as exciting as most here, but still super frickin' weird. I was staying at my friend's house, sleeping in his guest room. Friend is at work, his girlfriend is at home. One thing about this room is that it has a very heavy door that has to be held open by something super heavy or else it slams shut. Well, I sleep with the door closed. I wake up in the morning, and as I do every morning, I laid there for a bit longer before actually getting out of bed. Well, this time, all of a sudden, I see the door open, the light is still off, but the hallway light being on means I can see if someone's standing in the doorway. I have my eyes kind of opened and I can see that she's just standing there in the doorway, staring at me. I didn't move. I wanted to see what the hell would happen because this was thoroughly freaking me out. She just stood there for at least 10 minutes, didn't look away, didn't walk around the room. I was laying at a weird angle where I could see her perfectly. She could see me, but she couldn't see that my eyes were half open. I thought she may have been in there to grab something because there's a bunch of stuff in the closet, clothes and such. Nope. 10 minutes I waited for her to do something or to walk out. Finally, I flinched and feigned waking up and I heard her run out and slam the door. I got up, went to the kitchen, and she was as bubbly as could be, acting like nothing happened. Acting like she didn't just spend 10 minutes watching me sleep. I kind of think if you were just laying there watching her, watching you for like 10 minutes, if that was even as long as it happened for, I think you were hoping for something to happen. I would have just said, "Hey, why are you staring at me? Can I help you? Do you want something?" Dated this girl who I later found out to be literally a compulsive liar and also into witchcraft. After not being able to deal with her insanity anymore, I broke things off. She would wait outside my door for God knows how long until I came home and say she left something at my house. This happened a lot. One day, I was going to add a new email account to my phone and realized that her email account was still saved on my phone. I shouldn't have checked it, but she was actively stalking me and I needed to know what I was up against. There were tons of emails to some witchcraft lady she found online somehow. All about me. She was paying this internet witch like hundreds of dollars an hour for what I would consider witch consulting. It was all about me. How to cast spells to get me back, how to enchant me, how to curse my new GF, all kinds of crazy crap. She was using this lady as like a weird therapist almost, asking her a bunch of relationship questions too. This went on for months. The witch lady was getting a little annoyed at her, I could feel, although she couldn't complain that much because she was draining her for literally thousands of dollars. She told the witch that at some point I told her that she needs to seek professional help. The witch actually told her that might not be a bad idea. She ended up moving into the house of a mutual friend, this girl from school that was literally one building away from mine. My friend told me that she was always burning weird spices and candles. It was at the direction of the witch, actually. It was creepy as hell, and eventually she cut my brakes. I'm reminded of this time I saw that some witches were trying to spiritually take down Allah or something and needed like a lot of witch power to be able to defeat him. Because, you know, Allah is just so spiritually powerful, you need as many witches as you can get. But also, yeah, she pretty cray-cray. I fell asleep sitting next to one of my friends on the way home from a school trip in 12th grade. I woke up to her using my hand to play with herself. As I began to regain consciousness, she threw my hand at me and made a huge huge scene about it. I never talked to her about it. It bothers me to this day. Definitely top 3. Say what? That's gotta be considered assault on some degree. What the figgity yuck? Girl I had seen for 2 dates had her best friend SMS me anonymously claiming we went in a bar the night before and offering to come over to my place. I rarely went to bars as I worked night shift at the time, so I knew I hadn't met anyone at a bar. Eventually, after probing and pushing, I got the girl to confess. She said she was just testing to make sure I was trustworthy. Didn't see her again. I understand the need, the want, the desire for a trustworthy man in your life, but goddamn, there are better ways to go about it than that. Smarter ways, even. Met a girl at a bar and we ended up back at her place. We fooled around and fell asleep. She seemed normal all night and I saw no red flags at all. I definitely would have dated her again, until she went crazy. I woke up at around 5 a.m. and started getting dressed to leave. I had to get home and get ready for work. She woke up while I was dressing and totally freaked out. She was screaming angrily, "You can't leave!" I explained I needed to go to work and that I'd call her later. She was having none of that. Then she attacked. I literally had to physically fight my way out of her apartment with a few scratches on my arm for souvenirs. I have no idea what her deal was, and I never went back to the bar I met her in. What's the problem, girl? He said he'd call you back. I mean, I guess there's a chance that he's lying, but, what the hell? This happened to a buddy of mine, except she threatened to call the police and say that he raped her if he didn't stay. He nervously left the apartment. She called the cops and pressed charges. He lost his job, his sanity, everything. She eventually admitted nothing happened, yet his life was already crumbled into pieces and his reputation ruined. She never suffered any consequences. Be careful out there. It's sad but true, yeah. Some women will do you like that. A girl broke into my house 3 times in a week while I was rehearsing, Celeste. Each time she left money to repair the window, a large bag of Twizzlers, and 2 cans of tuna for my cat. That was it. We had never been romantically or physically involved. We barely even knew each other. This oddly sounds to me like the modern version of the humble beginnings of a festive or cultural celebration of some sort. Once a year, around the globe, women break into men's apartments and leave Twizzlers and cat food, whether they have a cat or not. That'd be crazy. Really drunk chick asked me to dance and proceeded to keep trying to pull my willy out, like forcefully. When I'd finally resisted enough, she called me a nerd and stormed off. You're not a nerd, buddy. You're a survivor. I was probably 9. It was after church service and there's this new lady there who took a liking to me. She was the new wife of the minister. We were outside waiting for the grown-ups to come out. I think they were having a meeting inside. And this new lady took me to a bench nearby. We sat, asked me lots of questions. Then she put my head on her lap, stroked my hair while humming a lullaby like I'm a baby. It felt really uncomfortable and I really wanted to escape. But I was a shy little boy and didn't want to offend her or something. So my sister from afar snickering at us. It went on like this for 30 minutes, but felt like hours. I was dying with cringe inside. If I were that child's sister, there'd be a point if it really went on for 30 minutes, which I highly doubt this woman sat there on a bench and stroked this random child's head for 30 minutes unless she really is a little bit unstable. But there'd be a point where you're kinda concerned, right? Weird. I had a similar experience when I was younger that your story made me rethink. I lived in a neighborhood with middle-class housing. I had a friend whose parents were divorced, so his mother lived right down the street from me, and when he wasn't with his father in Hawaii, he was with her. So I was young, like 10 or 11 years old. My friend was with his father at the time, so he was not there. I was walking home, and when I was walking past his house, his mother was outside sitting in front of her garage smoking a cigarette. It was odd since we never really spoke other than standard pleasantries. I was respectful, as you should be. She made me sit on her lap while she talked, and she, for whatever reason, kissed my cheek multiple times with her arm around me. I know, sounds hentai AF, but I can assure you this happened. I can't for the life of me remember what she was saying since I was a kid that was only focused on getting home. She had red lipstick on, which was now on my skin, of course. Moving along, after a while, she let me go and I walked home where my mom prepared me a bath. She asked me about the lipstick and I told her what happened. She didn't react much, but thinking in hindsight, she may have freaked out. Nothing happened after that, and I was a very optimistic child who didn't think much of it. I think that she was lonely without her son. She lived alone and I don't recall her having visitors. Just thinking as a parent in 2020, having your 10-year-old son come home with lipstick on his cheek would be a huge yikes. Yeah, that one's just a tad bit sketchy in my opinion. Met a girl at a party, we flirted, then we ended up in my bedroom. This was in my apartment. Heavy makeout. I suggest having intercourse. She declines. Heavier making out, basically including anything that's not intercourse. I suggest having intercourse again. She declines. Fair enough. We stopped the making out and planned to see each other again. The day we were supposed to meet, she stood me up. I had cooked and it was already time to meet. She told me that she doesn't want to see me again because I wasn't pushy enough. She liked men who are less soft and gentle. She basically told me that when she said no, I shouldn't have listened. Good riddance, I say. I don't care if a woman means yes when she says no. I take out a dictionary and I show her the meaning of no because that's what she said. Plus, in this day and age, how can you not be absolutely paranoid all the time that people are recording conversations to use in future courts of law or something? Keep in mind I'm only a junior in high school. I was about in 7th or 8th grade and I was at a New Year's party at my grandparents' house with all of their friends. You can tell I'm a party animal spending my New Year's with 60 and 70-year-olds, and one of their friends who I'd known for a while continued touching me and grabbing me in my waist and thigh region. She would sneak it in under the table or walking past each other or whatever. I totally understand the stereotypical grandma cheek pinch or whatever, but this was something else. After squeezing my butt with both hands, I had enough and said something to her. The rest of the night was super awkward, but the worst part was my grandma was defending her and downplaying the whole situation. It wasn't until I told my mom the next day she lost her temper on my grandma that she finally admitted she was wrong, and I haven't seen her since. For clarification, the person they haven't seen since is the groper. Well, here goes. I'm in high school and we're having PE. A girl that I hardly know asks me, "Hey, you want to see my butt?" And I say, no. She then proceeds to pull her whole pants down right in front of 30-odd students and the PE teacher. Everyone was just like, WTF, and she just pulls them back up and walks away like nothing happened. Someone I worked with sniffed the inside of my jacket that I forgot to bring with me. Later, she gave me a date with her as a wedding gift, only to be used before the wedding, and asked me if I was truly happy on my wedding day. Some people really do choose to strike at the worst or weirdest times, don't they? Older woman was cutting my hair. She was 60, I was about 24. She rambled on about how she loves bearded men and I might be old, but I can still look at the menu. She then told me about how she likes to go to clubs with her son in his 40s because she's his wingman and likes younger men. While this was happening, she kept running her hands down the front of my shirt. I later brought it up to the other employees there, who just laughed it off and said, "Oh yeah, that's just her. Apparently sexual assault is just part of her personality." The compliments didn't bother me too much until she started getting handsy. I'm fine with a bit of light flirting, but I'll admit if I had to sit through an entire haircut with this woman, I'd probably be like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a different chair. Woman I was engaged to was doing all the prep for the wedding. This was in her country and I didn't understand the language all that well, so I was a bit limited on how much I could help her out, other than helping to cut the invite cards out, etc. She was a very hot-tempered person as she was, but as much as I asked her what tasks I could help out with, she just refused to involve me in anything at all, and then complained that I wasn't helping enough. She argued and argued with me about how I didn't care despite my efforts to be involved in all the prep. It was all very manipulative. Eventually, she actually pulled a knife out at me. I slapped it off her wrist and she stormed off. When she left for work the next day, I packed my bags, took a taxi to the airport, and noped out of there. I'm picturing this woman coming back from work and being like, "Why has my fiancé left me? It couldn't possibly be because I pulled a knife on him." Wearing my sports jacket when I went to grab a fast food order, some woman I've never seen before shouted hi and waved at me like we were best friends, gave an awkward, confused wave back and left with my food. A couple hours later, I get a friend request on Facebook from someone I recognized as her. Best guess is she saw my jacket and stalked the sports roster to find my name and added me from that. Got blocked real quick. That or on a first date, she asked, "If you were going to kill me, how would you do it? I know how I would kill you." Then proceeded to tell me her plan on how she would kill me and get away with it. I don't know, sounds kinda hot if you ask me.
Oh yeah, baby. Why don't you tell me again how you're gonna murder me in my sleep and get away with it?
Asked me if I had feelings for her the day before her wedding, which I was in. Then after being married, insisted that we talk, and was trying to sit on my lap at a party when we were both drunk, and I told her it could wait until the morning. She revealed in the morning that she had cut herself after I wouldn't talk with her. I told her we couldn't be friends, and she texted me every day for 6 months without me responding until I learned how to block her number. A mutual friend told me she asked for my number from him this last summer. I haven't spoken to her for 10 years, so there's that. This woman is either down bad or she wants problems all the time. Back when I was working overnights at a national pharmacy chain, there was an older lady in her 50s that would pick up prescriptions and try to hit on me a few times. The most direct and creepiest thing she said to me was, "I don't know why women who go for younger men are called cougars. I like to be called a python because I like to ensnare young men. Do you like pythons?" Luckily, I was saved by a customer that promptly needed something picked up, and I ignored her until she left. I don't know why this just reminded me of an interaction I had at a bar where this older woman approached me, started talking to me, went, "Oh, drinking on a school night, are we, young man?" And I looked her dead in the eye and went, "Madam, I am 25 years old. I haven't been to school in like 7 years." When I was 17 eating a slice of pizza in a pizzeria in New York, I was sitting facing the glass looking out to the street. Time was around 7 p.m. It was getting dark. I'll never forget this 50-something-year-old lady was walking on the sidewalk, saw me eating, slowed down, stared straight at me with the most seductive grin, and then winked. Then continued on walking. Until that point in my life, I had never felt so many emotions at once. I was turned on, weirded out, intrigued, scared. This was a day I will never forget. She had black hair and was pretty hot. This one's rather nice, no invasion of someone's personal space or anything like that, just a little smile and a wink. I had a girlfriend once that was really possessive, to the point of stalker behavior. We had been dating for maybe 3 months and she didn't have a life. She never did anything and always wanted to spend time with me, and I was a fairly busy person. It gets to the point where she doesn't believe that I could have so much going on in my life that I can't video call her for at least an hour at the start and end of every single day. If I wasn't replying to her messages within 5 minutes, she'd send about 7 more, then call me a few times. Then it got to the point that she looked at all my social profiles to see when I was last online to see whether I should have seen her texts or not. Also, within 2 weeks, she had planned our wedding and named our 4 children Max, Harrison, Lily, and Sophia. Went downtown to CVS to get my dad's medication at like 9 at night. While waiting for the cashier to come back, 2 old women in line made conversation with me. Unprompted, they started feeling on my shoulders and arms. Pulled the "I have a girlfriend" lie while trying to be nice so no trouble would happen. Inside, I was extremely creeped out. As if she had a sixth sense, the cashier reappeared out of nowhere so I could pay and leave, giving the 2 women a glare in the meantime. They gave my biceps a squeeze before leaving me alone. Felt so dirty. I took a shower after I got home. Next time I saw that cashier, I thanked her. "No problem," she said. Gave her a tip. For those asking, no, nothing progressed. The cashier had an engagement ring on her finger. Were some people hoping for a surprise love story? Maybe not the worst, but here's something. I was in a really low mental state due to some past trauma and recent health issues when we started dating, which I think was part of the appeal for her. Since looking back, the whole thing was very predatory. Iffy age gap, 24M and 32F. She started talking shared finances just a month or so into the dating. It's pretty obvious what she was about in hindsight. Anyway, she encouraged me to start keeping a journal to help with my mental recovery. What a twist. For the journal, she would ask questions and I would write answers to them, which she would read. Most of it was extremely personal. A good amount also sensitive, sexual information. I too am boggled that I went along with this. She was also doing classic abuser things, trying to cut me off from my best friends and all. Fortunately, it only took a few months for me to start seeing clearly, though I wasn't quite committed to breaking up. She must have sensed some resistance, though. One day she asked for my journal, set it aside, then proceeded to start the breakup talk. I agreed that it wasn't working out for me either, and overall it was very amicable until I asked for my journal back, literally instant screaming that it belonged to her. I just stayed seated and kept repeating that she hadn't written a thing in it and I was the one who originally purchased it. She tossed it at me after a bit and I bounced out of there like a bat out of hell. She did send an apology about it over social media private messaging some years later, but it was also while letting me know that she would be attending kink meetups in my city though, so yeah, I gotta agree that entire relationship sounded sus as all get out.
Was at work late upgrading PCs to Windows 10. I'm happily married and had only recently gotten married at the time. While I was in the contact center upgrading multiple PCs, I was kind of cornered by a young woman who wound up saying, "If you ever need a release from your wife, I'm here and more than happy to, mess around or something. I think you're super attractive." And it kept going for a few minutes. I mentioned that I'm happily married with no intentions of cheating and she kind of pushed for a while longer, lingered while I kept working, and then eventually left. It was probably the most awkward 20 minutes I have ever sat through at work.
Hey, some women can't take no for an answer, and some of those women have never learned that patience is a virtue. But hey, good on you for not cheating on your wife. While I was at a rave, I had this girl walk up to me like the living dead while I was in a conversation with a bunch of people. This jaw swinger stops dead in front of me and says, "What's that?" and proceeds to grab me by the banger and beans with all the strength a turned-up 20-year-old can muster. I told her to get her frickin' hands off my junk, and she scuttled away like Gollum being separated from his precious. About 10 minutes later, a friend taps me on the shoulder, points behind me, looking concerned, and tells me to look. There are 3 cops with a canine and a crying, crazy harlot claiming I tried to grape her. They were ready to frickin' destroy me without so much as a hint of proof. If I wasn't with so many people all night, most of which were young ladies there to back my story up, well, I'm pretty sure that nutbag could have ruined my life very easily. So, suddenly and inappropriately grabs a man by his banger and beans and then proceeds to accuse him of grape? What a cow. Played an MMO for a while where you could join 5 guilds. This lady was in 3 of them, was always nice but very flirty with me. Our guilds used TeamSpeak a lot and the 2 of us got to talking. Turns out, though, we lived a few hundred miles and an international border away. We shared a crap ton of interests. She claimed to be in her 20s. I was over 30 at the time. We became friends, though she made it very clear to everyone that she wanted more. In fact, she referred to me as her nickname I went by in that game, and I found out that she was going to be traveling to an area near me right around my birthday. So I offered to meet her in a public setting. That's when she dropped it on me. She wasn't really in her 20s. She was turning 16. Technically over the age of consent, but yeah, still a kid. Even if there weren't legal issues, I simply was not interested in dating anyone that young. I have a 5-year rule. I only date people that are within 5 years of me. So I had a long talk with her. I explained to her that I was damn near twice her age, and while her interest in me was flattering, I wasn't interested. She was devastated, crying, telling me I was making a mistake because she would be the best girlfriend/future wife possible. That age was just a number. Finally, I told her that in 2 years when she turned 18 and brought proof of that, I would consider going on a single date with her if she was really that serious, and that if all went well, I would consider making an exception to my 5-year rule. But under absolutely no circumstances would I ever date or even meet with someone that was under 18. She wasn't happy, but eventually accepted that was the best she would get, and we stayed in touch even after I left the game. Fast forward almost but not quite 2 years, she has finally found a boyfriend. She hits me up on TeamSpeak. She wants me to travel up there to meet them because in her words, she wants me to know exactly what the hell I missed out on by unfairly and unreasonably turning her down. Age is just a number and shouldn't have gotten in the way. She has since become more normal, but yeah, those 2 incidents really creeped me out. No, I have never dated her. I had dated other women I had met in games before then, never have since. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, potential neckbeard and World of Warcraft player. I don't know if you can join 5 guilds in World of Warcraft. If anyone can guess what the game he was playing was, I'd love to know.
What's an experience you and a friend shared where you both silently agreed to never speak of it again? In grade school, a friend tried to make his pee hole bigger with an Allen key. I told him he shouldn't try, but he did anyway. There was a lot of blood, and it was pretty messed up. He just wrapped his bits in toilet paper, and nothing was said of the incident ever again. What the? Why would you even do that? I slept with a female friend of mine at her brother's birthday party. I ended up finishing all over a huge beanbag. After we got cleaned up and everything, we hung out. Her brother and his 11-year-old friends come running in and they start jumping on the beanbag that we forgot to clean. After jumping around for a bit, a lot of them started noticing wet spots on each other. We told them we spilled water and have not had a conversation about it to this day. I, female, semi-drunkenly hooked up with one of my guy friends, who I'd known for a long time. He has some really tiny equipment, maybe 2 to 3 inches erect. He was really nervous about it, but I didn't really mind since he was quite good at other stuff. The next morning, we were cuddling in bed and he begged me not to tell any of our friends about our hookup or his size. We're still good friends and his secret will always be safe with me. I went streaking with my male friend while very drunk. His big-boobed girlfriend decided to join in the nudity. I said she had some nice ones once they're revealed. My friend decides he doesn't like me ogling her jumblies and decides to fight me. Let the drunken nude wrestling begin. Back in middle school, a friend and I, both girls, used to sit on the couch in my basement and use one of those giant yoga balls to press into each other's crotches to get off. It felt great, and we would softly talk dirty to each other the whole time. This happened 2 or 3 times she came over. Haven't talked about it since. When I was nearing the end of my freshman year of college, a few friends of mine dropped acid one Sunday afternoon. The acid was apparently very strong, and all but one of them went off trip-a-dip-a-doodling on their merry way. The one I speak of got stuck in his own head and was found wandering through the halls, buck naked with a blank expression on his face. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, this was during family visit weekend. Anyways, after a couple of friends and I grab a towel and corral my fried friend into a dorm room, he proceeds to sit on a bed and stare out the window, still completely naked. Being the responsible person I am, I realize that he's so out of touch with reality to the point that he may accidentally hurt himself if left alone. So I tell the gathering crowd that I'll stay with him and they can go enjoy the beautiful Sunday Santa Cruz afternoon. I then grabbed the nearest smoking device and got incredibly stoned while I had to stare 4 hours at my naked friend on LSD while he worked his way out of his psychedelic pickle. Several people casually walked into the room, stared at my friend, stared at me, laughed, and then turned around and left during this time. A few hours into my marathon pot-laden babysitting venture, he looked over at me, stood up to put his pants on, and said, "That was really weird. We haven't mentioned it since." I walked in on my roommate and good friend taking care of himself. I saw everything. He'll occasionally try to jokingly bring it up when we're drunk or something, but I shut him down. Always. I'd rather just pretend it never happened. I, male, was probably 7 years old and at my male best friend's house playing Mario Kart, and we caught his mom giving my dad a BJ. Proceeded to act it out and get caught by them. They were peeved, but agreed to say nothing on the agreement we said nothing to our other parents. Didn't really help. Both marriages were crap. I'm sorry, what do you mean you proceeded to act it out? Never mind, I don't want to know. I, a straight male, had been drinking heavily with some friends all day and had recently returned from a nighttime skinny dip. I, being too drunk to get dressed, was just in a towel. We were all around the fire when I start to feel a bit sick. I end up accidentally dropping my towel and half crawling over to one of the girls, throwing up on her while halfway across. Apparently, every time I would heave, I would thrust a bit, so my bits were slapping her in the face. I woke up naked, spooning another friend's boyfriend in their tent with no recollection of the night's events. This would count, except they all seemed to never shut up about it. I mean, if I woke up in that situation, I definitely have some questions. So yes, please talk to me about it. What the heck happened? A buddy of mine was driving with me as a passenger. We went down the road near his house along the lake when he says, "Check her out. A woman in a bikini is going down for a swim. What a butt." He slowed down so I could roll down the window and do a catcall. We were stupid 17-year-olds. I was leaning out the window yelling, "Woo, baby, nice butt." She turned around and it was his mom. Nothing too crazy, but my best friend has never kissed a guy and she was afraid she would mess it up, so she begged me to teach her first. I'm a girl, by the way. I agreed, and I knew she was nervous, so we had a few glasses of wine first and then we tried to practice. I lean in to kiss her and she giggles, which makes me laugh. After several unsuccessful tries, we actually managed lip contact for about half a minute. I was really proud of her because I knew she was nervous. She suddenly bursts into tears and gets snot all over me, and cries about being a bad friend asking me to do this. I probably shouldn't have given her so much to drink in hindsight. We never speak of it only because we know we'll just laugh too much and she's mortified. On a college trip abroad, my best friend and I head up to our hotel room. We get asked by one of our tutors to get our other tutor from his room. We knock on the door and realize it's ajar. We sheepishly head inside quietly and spot a big bag of white powder on the bed with lines on the sideboard. Glance at each other, shake our heads, walk out, and get pizza. I was at my friend's house at around the age of 13. We're making tea and I open the cupboard for a mug. Inside is a Tupperware box with a large square tinfoil packet, around the size of a 5-kilo bag of sugar, and a bunch of little bags of brown powder. I take the cups out and close the cupboard and don't say a word. 10 years on and we've still never discussed it, and I don't think I've talked about it with anyone else either. Interestingly, his dad's a great guy and has been a very hands-on father despite divorcing my friend's mom. My best friend's husband hit on me a month before the wedding. We had all been drinking that night. He was wasted, and I was slightly tipsy but fully aware. I told him off and told him if I ever found out he tried that with another girl, I'd rip his appendage off. I was maid of honor at the wedding and I never told her. I thought about it, but they had already bought a house together. The wedding was set and she was just so happy. I put it out of my mind and pretended it never happened, and I'm glad I did. They were married for 5 years before she got brain cancer and died, leaving behind a daughter. He was the most doting husband during the 7 months she wasted away and is a truly amazing father. He's remarried now and the most loyal man I've ever met. If I had taken his one idiot move as the basis for his life, I could quite possibly have ruined a lot for him and her. I was unsure if I was doing the right thing at the time, but now I know it was definitely the best thing to do. Wow, that one really took a turn I was not expecting. Goes to show you though, sometimes good people just make mistakes. I had a drunken five-way with my roommate, his girlfriend, and another couple. 3 guys, 2 girls. We all ended up blacking out and only had vague memories of strip poker and awkwardness in the morning. Until we found the video. We all decided to delete the video and never talk about it ever again. The next month was very quiet. In 7th grade, my best friend and I were playing basketball at the park. I had to poo so bad, but the closest toilet was across the street. So I stopped and pulled my shorts away from my body and let the poop fall without touching my shorts. We walked away casually and no one saw. Ew, come on, man. Just hold it till you get there. A few years ago, I was at a party and had gone with a longtime female friend. All was well at first, but as the night went on, we both had a bit too much to drink. Her boyfriend of over 2 years had suddenly dumped her by text, and I had just found out my girlfriend had cheated on me. I say this because we were both dancing and both buzzed and emotionally unstable. As a joke, she grinds into me, laughing as she does it, but I start getting aroused and grind back. I suddenly realize what I'm doing and back off. But her face is red and she's visibly aroused. She pulls me into the bathroom and we proceed to get to business. Not super hot, lustful animal stuff, but we both enjoyed it and make out for a few minutes, then we both duck out, using the excuse I had to hold her hair as she puked. The hostess, a mutual friend, offered us to stay the night, which we took her up on. She passed out and I was having a heart attack. We were buzzed. What if she freaks out? Did I just ruin a 7-year-long close friendship just to feel good and make our exes angry? A million things ran through my mind, and I eventually nodded off. I woke up an hour later with her sprawled on me, which is fine. We've shared a bed more than a few times. She wakes up and blinks, looks at me and goes, "What the hell? Buy me dinner first next time, dork." She ends it with a laugh, but my face must have been ghost white. She hugs me and says, "2 consenting adults had fun. Plus, hey, better someone I know and trust rather than some weird jerk who might have tried something weird. We're still friends, okay? If you need to be alone, I understand." I hug her back and ask her if she's up for some IHOP. All is well and we're still best of friends and hang out regularly. That was about 2 years ago, and we both haven't said a word about it. We traded drunken, confusing oral at the tender age of 16. He initiated it, but I didn't need much persuading. Felt great at the time, but 10 minutes later started a spiral of self-doubt and confusion that lasted about a year. Worked it out in the end. He went on to marry a woman. I'm in a civil partnership with a man. We never mentioned it after that night, and given I moved away a few years later, plus, his lady wife, it's unlikely to ever be spoken of again, except here, now. When I was about 4 years old or so, I had a best friend whose name shall not be disclosed. We'll call him Tom. Tom and I lived in the same neighborhood, so we had plenty of opportunities to stay over at each other's houses while our mothers jibber-jabbed in the next room. When we were at my house, we played in the basement, which was outfitted as a playroom, with trains and Legos and all sorts of fun things, like markers. So he and I are downstairs in the playroom and he decides that he's done with the trains, so he picks up an orange marker. We didn't have any paper, so he finds this felt dartboard and colors on the white cardboard backing. I want to get along with him, so I do the same, choosing a green marker. Well, he soon gets bored with this as well, but he thinks the colors would look cooler if the lights were out. So he waddles up to the light switch, climbs on top of the toy chest, and turns off the lights. The colors do indeed look cooler. Of course, coloring is only so much fun when one is full of chocolate milk. So we both get up and walk over to where we tossed our socks earlier. I don't remember why we took off our socks, but it must have been something they said because we immediately peed all over them. Our socks were soon thoroughly soaked with our urine. This gave Tom an idea. He looked down at his mini member and thought to himself, "Know what would look really cool if it were orange?" At least, I assume that's what he was thinking, because he then started coloring his bits orange. Maybe he just wanted a better tan. And of course, Tom is absolutely right. It does look cooler. But you know what's cooler than orange? Green. Green is much cooler than orange. So I proceed to color my own willy green. Cue our Catholic mothers. Tom's mother is absolutely horrified. At least, that's what my own mother tells me. To be honest, I don't remember much after coloring the felt dartboard. My own mother, thankfully I guess, took a much more humorous approach. She thought it was hysterical. Anyway, they took us upstairs to the bathroom and made us wash our little dongs in the bathtub, while my mother washed and dried our socks. After that, Tom and his mom went home. I've never heard anything about that incident from anybody aside from my mother, and vague memories are my only assurance that the story is true. In any case, neither Tom nor I have ever spoken of it, nor will I ever, except to my fiancé, because if I don't, my mother will. Come on, Ma, be cool around the fiancé. When I was 15, my friend Gerald was staying over for the weekend. It was the typical Friday night. We were up playing video games on my N64, hanging out, and watching random horror movies at a low volume with the dialogue replaced with our own snarky narration while he browsed the net on my computer. This would be rude ordinarily, but he didn't have a computer or the internet at his home, and it was an opportunity for him to get some exposure to both. We were playing Gauntlet Legends when he paused the game and looked at me. "Dude, your arm's bleeding." "Oh, I must have gotten myself on a tree while I was dirt biking. It's nothing. I'm fine. Now let's kill some dwarves." We started up again, but I could see him looking at my arm every few minutes out of the corner of my eye. He paused the game again and dropped the controller between his knees. "So if you don't tell me what's actually wrong, I'm waking up your mom." "I'm fine." "Dude, cut it out. When you got up to grab a drink, your sleeve pulled up and I saw him." I sat there for a bit, closed my eyes and sighed. He knew, so there was no point in hiding it or keeping up the charade. He lifted my sleeve as I sat there and hung my head quietly, then backed away in hushed silence. When I looked up to make eye contact, his eyes were rimmed with tears. "Why would you do that to yourself, man? Those aren't clean lines. You carved them with something. It's complicated." "Then uncomplicate it for me." So I told him the truth. I was deeply depressed. My family was disintegrating, and it was the only way to get that kind of bottled emotional pain out of my system. I was halfway through explaining myself when he wrapped his arms around me and hugged the breath out of me. "I love you, original poster. Not in a gay way. You're my best friend and you're like a brother to me. I'm there for you, man. Just don't do this again, alright? I won't tell anyone, but you'd better promise me that you'll call me the next time it gets that bad." The rest of the night was understandably strained. No matter how we tried to forget it all, the elephant was still in the room. We never spoke about it again. He did his best to pretend nothing had happened the next day and would flat out not acknowledge my wounds. Okay, to anyone that's going through anything like this, there's always someone that wants to hear from you. Even if you don't feel like you have a close friend, there are numbers that you can call and people that you can talk to. Please, take care of yourself and love yourself. Kindly, a random stranger on the internet. 6th grade, outdoor school. Him and I ate a lot of pudding. A load of pudding. That night, we both book it to the bathroom, almost pooping our pants. We get to the toilets and just let it rip, and holy crap did we crap. We're sitting in adjacent stalls and we're just laughing our butts off at the sound of each other's poop. Think like fire hoses. Good stuff. We decided to never speak about that again, but really it's not that bad. Pretty funny. Me and my friend were both maybe 8 or 9, and we were watching adult content in his basement. He says, "This might seem weird, but when I watch this or see a hot girl, my thing gets real hard and bigger." I say, having knowledge of this for some reason, "It gets hard so it will fit into the girl's stuff. A soft one would probably just mush to the side." I pretty much gave my friend the talk because his dad never did, or never got the chance, because he died when we were 12. In high school, a friend had a party at his place. I had pre-gamed and drank a bit too much too fast and spent a majority of the party laying on the couch with my head spinning. As the party died down a bit, a good female friend, I'm male, came over and started rubbing my head and shoulders and asking if I felt okay. The party host announced he was going downstairs with his girlfriend and not to come down there unless you wanted to join. I looked up at my friend and asked if she wanted to go downstairs on a silly whim. She agreed, which caught me completely by surprise. I had no idea how much she had to drink either, but alas, we went down to the basement as well. I don't even know what I was expecting. When we got there, my friend's bedroom door was closed and locked, and he promptly told us to go away. Her and I went over to his couch and sat down together. I don't even know how it started. We just started making out. Nothing serious, just some hand stuff. We went to the bathroom, cleaned up, and literally never spoke a word about it, ever again. So I'm part of this 3-man best friend group thing. We'll call these 2 best friends D and M. They're both like brothers to me, and we've known each other for around a decade. We're all in our early 20s. The kind of friendship where we can and do talk about anything without discomfort. We cannot be uncomfortable around each other anymore. One of our random guy talks goes in the direction of sexuality one day, and I mention the idea that I'm probably bi. There's a point that's made relating back to the fact that we have this 3-way bromance going on where we joke about being lovers and stuff. And there was a tongue-in-cheek joke rumor that I was secretly dating D in high school. So it's funny that I'm not straight. Funny. One day, I'm hanging out with D and just chatting. Topic of sex stuff comes up. He asks me about my bi-ness. Asks if I've ever thought about him or M in that way. Oh man, I know you're just curious, but come on. This isn't gonna end well. I go for honesty and openness and he responds in kind, because we're the kind of guys that can speak honestly without awkwardness. No need to dress things up. So we talk frankly about the theoretical idea of the 2 of us as a romantic couple, on the assumption that speaking about it seriously doesn't mean we're serious about it. We get stuck on this topic and somehow come to the conclusion that we wouldn't make a bad couple. Too bad he isn't into guys, right? Long story short, it ends up being a long night. And the more he thinks about it, the more he doesn't see such a problem with the idea. I knew we were tight, but this is something else. He's similarly surprised by how much the idea doesn't faze him, and within a couple hours, our tone moves from neutral comments stemming from simple curiosity to a pretty serious discussion that sounds like he might try to take it somewhere. I don't know what happened, seriously, but suddenly it's like 1 a.m. in the morning and he straight up asks me out, completely serious. As far as I know, the dude's completely straight, and I've been best friends with him for half my life. Suddenly, he's telling me he thinks he loves me, and it feels so natural to say that, and why didn't he say it sooner? And I'm sorry, man, but I don't see you in that way. Emotional intimacy is one thing, and we got that going for us. You're a cool guy, really, but I can't accept this. I just can't see you in that way at this point. I can't. It's never been brought up again. What movie had a happy ending until you consider what had to happen next? At the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you just know that Cameron is going to get his butt whooped by his dad. Braveheart. I mean, the movie is historically inaccurate, but it ends at the Battle of Bannockburn, where the narrator says they won their freedom, but that freedom only lasted like 5 years before war broke out again. Breakfast Club. Bender most likely went home and got beaten by his dad again after the movie ended. The Truman Show. This guy has no idea what the real world is like and he's just thrown into it. Most people have 18 years of preparation. If we're being honest here, he probably sued the crap out of them, so I'm sure Truman was living in luxury afterwards. Lawyers would be jumping to take this case. The Day After Tomorrow. It isn't hugs and giggles. Things do not go back to normal. The human race got slapped hard. Much of the upper hemisphere is covered in ice. Let's not mince words. A few billion people died. Whole nations were wiped off the map. Yes, you have survivors, but now this problem. Food. A huge section of the world's agriculture was taken away. How are you going to feed the remaining masses? This doesn't include shelter. Those lucky ones who are on the edge of the frost are going to move further down, South America and Africa. While true, the ice will melt eventually, this massive snow front will have a huge effect on global climates. Everything will be colder. sunlight being reflected off the surface rather than absorbed. The survivors will have such terrible hardships ahead. It will take a generation or more to bounce back. We're not even talking about political turmoil. Warlords, tyrants, and dictators will rise to power. Wars over limited resources. The movie ends with our gang getting picked up by what remains of the US government. The future is so uncertain. Many more will perish from harsh weather, starvation, sickness, and/or hostilities. We don't just hold hands and sing Kumbaya. The human race will suffer with huge blood losses to come. I think I kind of want to see this sequel now. The day after tomorrow. WALL-E. It would still take decades before the people were actually able to live off the earth, and their quality of life would still be awful compared to their lives in the ship. Monsters Inc. There's a reason they made a prequel and not a sequel. Laughter being 10 times more powerful means a lot of factory monsters would have lost their jobs, even accounting for the energy crisis. Rent. Mimi has AIDS. She'll definitely be dead soon. Roger and Collins have HIV in the 80s. They'll probably be dead soon. Mark is all alone and is gonna watch his best friends die. Joanne and Maureen might get a happy ending though. Yeah, the characters in Rent get it pretty rough. The Sound of Music. The nuns were almost definitely executed by the Nazis as soon as it became apparent they helped the family escape. Almost any horror movie where one character makes it through the entire movie and is the last man standing, actually usually a female, covered in blood and surrounded by dead bodies. What happens when the police arrive? Yeah, I can't say that looks good. Whiplash. Outwardly, it seems like a happy ending. Andrew proves Fletcher wrong and showcases his abilities as a musician. However, that's exactly what Fletcher wanted, and proved that his abusive teaching style works. All Fletcher wanted was his Charlie Parker. That's why he was so angry when his former student died. He thought he was going to fill that role. When Andrew begins his solo, at first Fletcher is clearly mad and confused. But as Andrew continues, Fletcher guides him, and the movie ends with them sharing eye contact before finishing the song. With this, Andrew becomes his Charlie Parker, something Fletcher can put on a pedestal and say, I created that talent. You also have to consider what happens to Andrew after this. He goes right back into the abuse he suffered from under Fletcher, and loses all the love and enjoyment that he has for jazz music. In my opinion, I see Andrew having a similar fate with either the real Charlie Parker, a heroin addict who died of overdose at 34, or Fletcher's former student who took their own life. Zootopia. The whole plot of the movie hinges on reshaping the natural order by all living in unity. That's great. Right until you realize that herbivores are still super good at reproducing to make up for carnivores, as shown by the rabbit population sign counter going up at a ridiculous rate gag. Except nobody's eating them anymore. By the end of the movie, it's also revealed that there's herbivore extremists which want to take it further and get rid of carnivores. Overpopulation and possibly genocide is on its way. Kate and Leopold. Kate finds out that she can't vote or own property anymore now that she's living in the past. Also, she has to live with the knowledge that she porked her own grandson. The Avengers. Everyone's sitting around having coffee and they're still pulling bodies out of the rubble. Back to the Future. Marty is now essentially living with a family of strangers. It's not going to take them long to realize he has no knowledge of any conversation they've ever had or anything they've ever done together. Also, let's just keep that guy who tried to assault your mom around so we can wash our car. And why does our son seem to look exactly like that guy from high school? Finding Nemo. How do the fish get out of those plastic bags? They're probably dead. One of them even says, "Now what?" Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. It seems as though they were meant for each other because even with no memory of each other, they still find each other and fall in love. As the movie foreshadows with repeating or glitching the last shot of the film, they're doomed to a cycle of meeting, falling in love, breaking up, heartbreak, erasing their memories about each other, and repeat. This one is heavily implied by the movie. But yes, you do need to kind of play past the movie in your head to really get the full impact of the ending. Get Out. This whole white family is murdered and the only survivor is a blood-soaked black guy in the uppity suburbs. Seriously, good movie. One of the best I've seen in years. But I left the theater and the first thing I said to my husband was, that investigation is not going to go well for him. Donnie Darko. Clearly, there are multiple people in that universe who have succumbed to an unfortunate fate they have no control over in order to save the world. The road to El Dorado. There's a decent chance that Miguel and Tulio carried germs to the city that the natives have no immunity against. And there's an extremely high chance that Shell will pick something up if they take her back to Europe, or to any of the other colonies. The Never-Ending Story. Read the title. It's gonna come back around again, and worse, on an infinite loop, long after you switched that VHS tape out and went to bed. That gut-wrenching scene with the horse near the start, doomed to repeat. Beauty and the Beast. They had to start their life together without any furniture in that entire castle. Not having any furniture isn't that big of a deal. Considering all the servants were turned into furniture, I think the West Wing being full of shredded corpses is a bigger problem. Dirty Dancing. It ends on a happy note, but we all know they're not able to be together after the family leaves. My girlfriend in high school loved that movie, and every time she made me watch it, at the very end I always said, and they never saw each other again. The one that annoys me the most, even if I really enjoyed the movie, is Kingsman. The villain succeeded. Imagine living in a world where electronics can cause rage-inducing feelings. People would be abandoning technology in a world that isn't prepared for that. I mean, sure, people can romanticize living in the Wild West or hunter-gatherer, but there's a reason why people weren't considered adults until 13-ish. They didn't know how to succeed in that life until 10 years or so of training. Now you're dumping the entire Western technocrat society into such a state. They can't survive. On top of this, if Sam Jackson's penetration into various world leaders is as ubiquitous as it seemed, that also means that there was no one left to take command of the chaos. He didn't target just politicians, but performers and celebrities too. With people jokingly saying how The Rock should run for office and how people praise Schwarzenegger's reign as congressman, it's obvious that charismatic celebrities can use that to obtain positions of power. Except they're all dead. Anybody who lived on the East Coast from the Great Blackout back in 2003 would remember how tense things were after a few days. Now, instead, there's no one figuring out how to turn the lights back on. Plus, there isn't a few days of grace before people get violent. The violence has already happened. So, to set the stage, you have a population that just began attacking each other from technology. When they stop and look around, some old rivalries might have been reignited. On top of this, people are going to drop technology and live a life they're not prepared for. There will be no leadership or voice due to their eradication, which means that people are going to have to determine who's a leader. That is rarely peaceful. I know that there's a Kingsman too, but let's be honest, this is probably how things would have played out. Michael Banks from Mary Poppins is exactly the right age to grow up and be killed in the First World War. Passengers. Even if you ignore the Stockholm-driven relationship, the couple spent decades filling the spaceship with plants. Plants. As the roots of those trees grow, there's a massive risk of them rupturing vital supply lines. Or even worse, making a hole that leads out into the vacuum of space. Plant roots will push through concrete. That spaceship is beyond screwed. If humidity in the air was increased, there's also a huge amount of rusting that could happen. And that's ignoring that the couple spent decades eating the food supplies. The food supplies were supposed to be enough for a few thousand people for a few months. 2 people eating into that for decades, plus everything that got wasted during the film, means that inventory is massively depleted. Basically, if you woke up on that ship, there's a really good chance you'd die, either of starvation or the ship degrading because of all that plant life. The 2 main characters put 5,000 lives in serious jeopardy. Frozen. Number 1, the queen very likely can't sleep with her husband without killing him. Therefore, she can't breed. And even if she can, who knows what kind of mutant baby she'd spawn. Number 2, Anna can't marry Kristoff if the traditions of royalty in that country follow the vast majority of royalty traditions I've ever heard of. And number 3, the country was frozen over for at least a week or 2 with thick snow in the middle of growing season. Those people are gonna starve to death. I won't lie, I never thought about the food situation in Frozen. You're probably right there. War games. I've always been curious what happens to Lightman after the WOPR decides that the only winning move is not to play. He obviously had such a big role in helping to avert nuclear war that they had to let him go. But how do you release a 17-year-old back into the world after seeing all of that top secret stuff? My personal headcanon? McKittrick releases David with no charges, telling him in so many words, "Thanks for your help, don't hack anymore, but go study computer science at university. You might have a promising career ahead of you." Django Unchained. Sure, he's an amazing gunslinger at the end of the film, but he's in the South, pre-Civil War. He just killed a prominent plantation owner and everyone on the plantation. Just the sight of an African American on a horse stopped people in their tracks, and that was with Schultz claiming to be somewhat of a master. But now it's just him and his wife. I'd like to add, I love this movie, but if you think about it, after what happened in Django, I can't see him lasting long. Trainspotting. Even though Mark is totally supposed to be an anti-hero, you find yourself rooting for him throughout the film. After he screws the other guys over and is literally running away from all his problems, declaring that he's going to change his life for the better, you think just for a second that he was being honest, until you realize that he's a heroin addict with a duffel bag full of cash. Logan. Even though the kids get away, Laura will eventually be like her dad, the Wolverine, with her body and healing factor weakening as she gets older due to the adamantium in her. Cue a whole bunch of arguments in the comments under this post right now. Risky Business kind of sets Tom Cruise's character up for terrible decisions because he gets away with everything. Alien Resurrection. The size of that explosion as the spaceship hits Earth indicates major atmospheric turmoil, dust being whirled up, etc., akin to a nuclear winter. Goodbye crops worldwide. The Graduate. I thought it was a happy ending until my history teacher explained what their expressions on the bus at the end meant. Those two are basically screwed. No job, no car, no money, no family. Jurassic World. Frustrated me that the main characters literally walked off into the sunset. No, don't turn this into a happy ending. Hundreds of people died. And can you imagine the lawsuit that's gonna happen? My personal opinion, none of the Jurassic Park movies are worth watching after the first one. In Kill Bill, Beatrix kills him, but probably has a ton of assassins who are constantly trying to kill her now. And now she has a daughter. Things will just get more complicated. For this one, there's also the much-loved fan theory that the little girl from the first one will come back and try to kill Beatrix eventually. I kind of like that idea for a sequel, if they ever decide to do one. Elysium. Nice. Make people live longer in an already dangerously overpopulated world. Can't wait for the food shortages, power shortages, water shortages, and so on. Yeah, I don't know if they really thought that one through. Transcendence. Will uploads the virus to save Max. This instantly bricks the world's computers and deletes the internet. There's definitely going to be major implications because of this. Ghost. Patrick Swayze happily goes off to ghost heaven, having just sentenced Demi Moore to a life of solitude and celibacy because she knows he's waiting for her. Gravity. For a start, she's stuck miles from anywhere, weak, no map, shoes, food, or drinkable water. And even if the capsule is sending out an alert, there's no reason to assume it would be picked up, as there's no satellites to get the signal. Plus, the Chinese, whose Soyuz it was, would probably assume it was empty, because for some reason there was nobody on their space station. A lot of Ewoks died due to the raining debris from a recently obliterated Death Star shortly after the end of Return of the Jedi. It seemed like Jesse got a happy ending at the end of Breaking Bad, until you think about how his fingerprints are definitely all over that meth lab. Did Jesse get a happy ending? I don't know, dude had it pretty rough. The Island. You just released a couple thousand burdens to the state, crippled an enormous company, destabilized the economy, and put thousands of people out of work. Not to mention the unfathomable legal complications of having a couple thousand clones running around. Whenever I watch this movie, I definitely have that same thought, that there's definitely going to be some problems now that a bunch of rich and famous people's clones are running around the world. Harry Potter. Okay, so Voldy's dead, but now you have a world which is split down the middle and in a huge mess. People died over the year and in the Battle of Hogwarts. The Ministry would be so ruined from the year of management, and employees would be turning on one another. The wizarding world of Britain would need to rebuild from the ground up. Everything and everyone will be seeking recompense, and Harry would have a horrid time of it. He's the savior, and people will want to meet him, to thank him, to sob sad stories, and the families of the Death Eaters will either want to kill him or try to ask him to help their family members. Yeah, it would definitely be a bumpy road for the Ministry of Magic for quite a while after all the events that took place. Case 39. The monster is dead, but Emily's life is ruined. Her friends are dead. All potential witnesses are dead. Her friends and colleagues are gonna sue the pants off her and put her in jail because she killed an innocent girl who had already been through so much. Her career is as dead as the monster. There's nothing she can do to convince the society at large now, even though she saved them all. American Beauty always unsettled me because Kevin Spacey finally finds peace, but his daughter and her boyfriend next door are going to prison for his murder. Hitch. The dude lost his entire business and everyone is questioning their relationships. I'm not sure what he's gonna do with no work. The girl is a reporter who almost lost her job. I don't think she can take over payments for his place. Hey, Hitch is a pretty smooth guy. I'm sure he'll find some work somewhere. The Matrix Revolutions. The Oracle admits that the peace brought with Neo's sacrifice is only temporary. It was a crappy ending to begin with, though. Deep Impact. There's no way the world was peaceful, despite that rousing speech from Morgan Freeman. The Golden Compass. In the movie, the characters look into the blazing sunset while the music swells. In the book, a boy is ripped apart under the cover of darkness, perhaps 12 hours or less later. Ponyo. The world is really messed up by the events of the movie. Ponyo gets to be human and to be with her love, but the world is put back to the Dark Ages, with most of it underwater and prehistoric sea life roaming the waters. All farming is destroyed, no satellites, industry drowned. When the petrol available is consumed, what then? Hairspray. The main characters get together, but Tracy was still wanted by the police for assault and evading arrest. She was definitely caught when the cameras turned off. Training Day. There's no way the three wise men and Alonzo's crew would have let Jake live after what he's seen. Drop Dead Fred. The imaginary friends are sent to children to overcome problems in their lives. Fred is sent to Mickey's daughter. What are her problems? And how come Mickey didn't recognize the name Drop Dead Fred, even though he remembered it from childhood earlier on? Independence Day. Can you imagine cleaning up after every major city in the world has been destroyed? Sure, the aliens are gone, but you still have to clean up 1 billion bodies and spend $1 gazillion trying to fix things. Groundhog Day. The guy has spent years living an essentially consequence-free existence. The switch to Iron Man mode is going to be jarring and probably fatal for him and/or people around him. Forrest Gump. When you realize that Forrest is left alone with Forrest Jr. to take care of, and that both of them are going to be coping with AIDS in a time that the disease was completely maligned. The Pursuit of Happiness. Everyone is all happy that Will Smith gets the job, but they all seem to forget it's just an internship, an unpaid internship. He's still broke. He's still homeless. A few weeks of no showers, bad sleep, and no food, and he'll be fired and back in the same position he was. Death Proof. All the women would be arrested, convicted, and imprisoned for that car chase where they hit other cars that ended with them beating a man to death when he was lying on the ground helpless. Step Brothers. The guys start to grow up and turn into exactly what they despised before, adult wage slaves. Running the karaoke business starts to get boring, so Brennan turns to drugs. As a result, his psychiatrist girlfriend leaves him, and he falls further into the throes of addiction. Dale is devastated when his father, Robert, passes away. The hijinks are over, and reality sets in for the brothers. They eventually fall out of touch with each other. Chris Kardashian continues to cyberbully them to their respective graves. Wow, you really brought a dark twist to a comedy movie there. Lawyers of Reddit, what was the least defendable case ever brought to you? Probably my client charged with statutory assault. multiple accounts, who impregnated his high school sweetheart's daughter after sleeping with said daughter from the ages of 13 to 15. He was 35 at the time of the birth. DNA in the form of a baby is strong evidence for the state. I had a client who won just shy of a 7-figure settlement in a personal injury case. She then dropped into my office to ask me to file a fee dispute against the attorney who represented her in the personal injury action. That attorney took a little over $260,000 on this case. If you're doing the math at home, this guy took a 27% fee on the type of case where 40% fees are common. Did a fantastic job because the woman got nearly $1 million, and then she turned around and tried to sue him to recover any of his fees. I rejected the case out of hand and then got an ethics complaint for discriminating against her. It kinda sounds like this lady just needs to take the win. She's being really greedy here. A woman wanted me to sue her previous lawyer for charging her a lot of money but producing almost no work to justify his fees. She gave me what she told me was the lawyer's total work product, a page printed off the internet for which she said she was charged thousands of dollars for legal advice. She had already brought a claim via my jurisdiction's disciplinary body for lawyers. She had lost and wanted to bring an appeal. The judgment kept referring to documents that I hadn't seen. I pushed her to give me everything, and she came in with multiple files full of immaculate legal work that totally justified the fees she was fighting. We told her to get lost, but she wasted a lot of my time before we realized she was full of it. So this guy ordered a pizza, and nowhere was it specified that the delivery was supposed to be done in under 30 minutes. But the guy assumed it because movies. The delivery arrived 1 hour later, and it wasn't even necessary to apologize. They brought him his order and an additional beef pizza. The guy wanted our firm to sue them because he's Hindu, doesn't eat beef, and apparently felt offended. You're really fishing for a lawsuit. Sounds like someone's just looking for some easy money. A friend of mine was in a case where a guy was accused of graffiti vandalism, among other things, and the conversation with the judge went like this. "Sir, did you make this graffiti?" "No, I did not, but it has your signature at the end." "Yeah, an artist has to sign his work." Case closed. Some people really need to learn to just keep their mouths shut. I worked in-house for a famous character company with a large fan base. A few crazies a year would call in. A guy called in claiming that we stole characters that he created and demanded to be compensated. I calmly asked them to provide more details so that I can determine whether this has any merit to it. He states he designed the characters himself and gave it to the well-known actual creator when he was a kid, and the creator pawned them off as his own. I asked him when he was born, and it's a good 20 years after these characters were actually created. I ask him to explain this, and he pivots and says he also created some other well-known famous characters and brands. Characters and brands that are not owned by my company. I kindly ask that if he wants to pursue anything to send us something in writing, and hang up. I figured if he wasn't going to do some really basic research on his own claim, he wasn't going to spend any time to write it up. Never heard from him again. My dad had a client who went on trial for being a felon in possession of firearms, possession of stolen property, burglary, and distribution of narcotics. The guy had multiple pictures of himself on Facebook holding guns, drugs, and cash, and had videos of himself both breaking into someone's house and stealing a gun, as well as selling hard drugs on several occasions. Despite my dad basically telling this genius he was going to prison either way and to plead for a reduced sentence, the dude still pled not guilty. We occasionally joke that the guy clearly wasn't competent to stand trial by virtue of being so dumb. Not my client, but my dad and the hospital he worked at was sued by a gentleman after he saved his wife's life. Here's the situation. Patient is pregnant with 8th child and miscarries. The fetus is removed, but the patient starts bleeding uncontrollably. The only option available is a hysterectomy. It was either that or she dies right there on the table. My dad gets called in to do the surgery, performs it successfully, and everyone's happy. Except it turns out the patient's husband is quite devout and beyond peeved that his wife can't have kids anymore. So he sued the hospital. No firm would represent him, and he ended up bringing proceedings himself. Went all the way to trial, and he lost hard. Yeah, that's an incredibly hard argument to make in court. There was no other option for your wife to live. Either way, she wasn't going to be giving you any more kids. It sounds like the husband is only upset because in his mind, he's now stuck with a wife who can't bear children. Instead of if she had passed away, he could have remarried. The whole situation is just gross. The client lived on a large riverfront block. She had a jetty for a boat. Her large tree fell over in a storm and landed mostly in the water, making it difficult to moor her boat. She wanted us to sue the government for not taking away her fallen tree. That tree's your personal property. You have to deal with it. It's not the government's. I represented a tree trimming company that went to the wrong address and cut down all the mature trees in that yard. The right address was 100 North X Street. The company went to 100 South X Street and just went straight at it, hacking away. I still have no idea why the insurance company didn't just settle that pre-suit. Not a lawyer, but I was a jailer, and I used to pull double duty as a bailiff. A guy stole a pickup truck and was later captured passed out behind the wheel, parked on a sidewalk surrounded by a ludicrous amount of drugs and guns. He had elected to represent himself because he wasn't done being stupid. His legal defense? Double jeopardy. You can't charge me for theft, drugs, and felon in possession of a weapon because I've already been convicted of all those charges before. In short, during his jury trial, he admitted to doing it, but explained with a smug grin that since he had already done time for the same charges from another case before that, he couldn't be prosecuted for them ever again. This is not how double jeopardy works, folks. He's in prison now for 20 years. If he'd taken legal counsel, he easily could have cut a deal for 5. Surely this guy understands the flaws in his own logic, right? Like, come on, you're gonna go to court with that? A dad in his 60s hadn't been paying child support for decades, and he owed more than $60K for 2 kids who were now adults. He was basically living at a farm in the middle of nowhere, so no one could find him. He worked for cash, so the money couldn't be garnished from anywhere. He then came into an inheritance which was deposited into his bank account and promptly confiscated by family maintenance. He wanted it back, apparently. The dude's just upset that he finally had to pay something. A lady was sacked by a large company. They had caught her embezzling money to fund a gambling habit. They had clear evidence the embezzling had occurred, and she didn't deny it. She sued the company for $300,000 for unfair dismissal. My sister's firm represented the company against this woman. The case was so easy, the firm gave it to my sister as her first ever solo attempt. My sister screwed it up, badly. Not only did she lose, the court awarded the woman $500,000 instead of the $300,000 she asked for. In the end, it was a good career move. The partners all knew her name and dropped into her office one by one to offer their sympathy. I would have loved to hear some more details on exactly how this went so bad. Worked in family law in California for like 2 years before deciding I'd hang myself if I didn't change career paths. In California, the obligation to pay spousal support or alimony ends when the recipient begins cohabitation with a new romantic partner. A guy who was positively getting ripped in half in his monthly payments came to my office and said he was aware of the rule about cohabitation and wanted to argue his point in court. You see, his ex was a narcissist. She was in love with and had begun cohabitation with herself. Her presence in her apartment should count the same as if it were a romantic partner there. He was bordering on begging me to take his money. I refused. Buddy, the lawyer's trying to do you a favor and save you some money. Just listen to him. My brother's a lawyer. His client took a backhoe, dug up a standalone ATM, and scooped it onto a flatbed truck. Then, and only then, noticed a security camera nearby filming everything. He got some black spray paint out of his truck, went up 2 inches away, really nice view of his face, and sprayed the camera lens. He insisted on pleading not guilty. I read a patent and told my bosses it was both invalid and infringed by no one. It had 10 means for elements in each patent claim that no one would practice, or that weren't supported in the written description. The partners, my bosses, new to patent litigation, sued on the patent anyway, using young, inexperienced, unseasoned attorneys in the firm. 3 years later, after billing the client millions of dollars, every defendant won by proving each claim either not infringed or invalid. Then, my employer appealed and billed the client another buttload of money, with a young attorney in charge of the appeal that didn't understand the underlying issues on any level, because he was a former teacher instead of a patent attorney. It was such a bad patent, no one would settle at any point in the case. My bosses were blood-sucking trolls. I quit for these and similar parallel reasons. The firm finally imploded. I'm a paralegal. Local guy in his 20s decides to go rob his dealer. He got the wrong apartment. When a college girl opened the door, he shot her and fled. She laid there for hours just out of reach of her cell phone and listened to it ring while her mom called. She lived. A neighbor found her. Now she's paralyzed from the neck down, and her face is very deformed. This is a small town. During the trial, the jury was shown just how strung out on drugs he was, and how he even bragged to a few friends that he shot someone. That's pretty hard to defend. He got 40-something years. The girl that drove him to and from the apartment was also given jail time. This one's just sad to hear, that someone innocent was hurt for no real reason. I had a guy who wanted me to sue the city because the city took too long to bust his neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. The guy claimed his neighbor's house had mice because of the garbage truck that was parked there when it wasn't hauling garbage. He said the neighbor's mice were causing his house to have mice, reducing the value of his house so he couldn't sell it. I asked him how long he'd been trying to sell his house. He said he wasn't trying to sell it yet. I asked him what he had done about the mice so far. He said he tried to call the city to have them get rid of the mice, but the city refused. I asked when he reported the neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. He told me he never reported it. The city just towed the garbage truck after the neighbor was arrested for some unrelated crime, a DUI. I asked the guy how he knew all this, and he said the neighbor and him were partners in the illegal garbage disposal business, and his neighbor's old lady told him about the arrest in the towed garbage truck. Like, dude, what do you want me to do in this situation? If you take this to court, you're just gonna go to jail too. Are you really thinking this through? I was representing an independent mortgage broker from a small town on the East Coast. One day, he just up and left without notifying his clients. Fast forward a few months later, and one of his former clients discovers significant mistakes in her residential mortgage paperwork that caused massive issues with the bank, costing thousands in legal fees to rectify. Naturally, she wants to recover damages. Only the broker can't be found. The office is boarded up for non-payment of rent. His house is up for sale, and nobody knows where he went. The only indication of his whereabouts was his Facebook profile. He was swimming with dolphins somewhere sunny with his teenage daughter, which infuriated the plaintiff. Fortunately, he'd paid his insurance up front and it hadn't expired, so he would be defended by us through the insurer. When I finally got in touch with him after around 2 months, he explained that he'd lost all interest in the profession about a year ago. Since then, he took on clients or helped existing ones, but with basically zero financial background checks and basically no regard for structure or timing of the transaction. He was rubber stamping everyone and everything. His work was so shoddy and his file management so poor that we basically had nothing to go on. He was dead to rights, and he didn't care at all. Then one day, he declared bankruptcy, signed the house over to a trustee, and got a short-term visa to live in Australia where his daughter was studying. We settled that one quickly as he had no intentions of returning for trial and we'd probably never be paid. I mean, hey, at least it's over quickly, I guess. We had a client skip bail and run. I looked him up on Facebook and he had posted a photo of the bond paperwork and a bunch of $20 bills. The post read something like, "Man, F the law and my bondsman. Can't nobody tell me nothing." Blah blah, typical hood stuff. We live in BFE, Texas. Dude is not a gangster. Anyways, he didn't realize that the only reason we bonded him was because we were going to represent him. We withdrew the bond and the case. In the motion to withdraw, we quoted his Facebook post and attached a copy of it as Exhibit A when we filed it. I have a relative who's a lawyer. She worked for a hospital on a wrongful life case that was pretty miserable. The plaintiff had given birth to a baby with very severe congenital deformities. The plaintiff sued every health professional she saw while pregnant, claiming that if they had told her about the deformities, she would have aborted. A quick look at medical records shows that the plaintiff never really pursued prenatal care. She went to a local emergency room very early in her pregnancy to get a pregnancy test, apparently common in impoverished communities. And she later returned to that same ED a month later with abdominal pain. The ED doc did an ultrasound on her belly and determined the fetus was not in distress. But he didn't do a thorough exam because he wanted to figure out where the belly pain was coming from, not do an organ scan like an OB would. But she sued that hospital. Then she was arrested for check fraud and saw a physician in jail. But she didn't tell that doc about her pregnancy, so he didn't do an ultrasound at all. But she sued whoever provides that healthcare. The jail, maybe? It's just a sad case that the hospital won handily. This one's a little more messed up, but it's come up a couple times now. If you haven't done your own due diligence and had the problem try to be taken care of properly through the correct channels, it's really hard to take anything to court. It's hard to place that blame on someone else when you didn't put in any of the work to prevent it in the first place. I represent condo and homeowners associations. One of my condo association clients wanted to evict some tenants because they were fat. I'm not even joking. Now, the law does, in some cases, allow the association to evict non-owner tenants. This is very fact-specific, however. I spent a long time trying to elicit from my client exactly what these tenants were doing that warranted eviction.
Well, they're just disgusting people. They're fat.
You can't evict someone just because they're fat. We didn't end up filing suit. My dad was a patent and trademark attorney about 10 years ago and worked for a pharmaceutical company. The owner of the company adopted the slogan, "Just do it," not knowing that the trademark belonged to Nike. When the owner found out that the trademark belonged to one of the biggest companies in the world, rather than change the slogan and avoid a lawsuit, he calls up Nike and expresses how funny he thinks it is that they have the same slogan. My dad got them to settle the case, and the catchphrase was later changed. The guy literally just called up Nike to say, "Hey, sue me." Luckily, I was on the other side of one of these ridiculous cases. I live in an area where liquor licenses are extremely valuable commodities. They can be transferred from one person to another, which is often easier than convincing a municipality to issue you a new one for your bar or restaurant. My client was opening up a new restaurant and found some wackadoo who had a liquor license that he wasn't using. I believe his bar previously folded. He agreed to sell his license to my client for about $250,000. The contract had a minor notice provision, something like you have to send notice of whatever in 7 days. My client's former lawyer dropped the ball and sent it in 10 days. Now the wackadoo received full payment but decided that because this minor notice provision was breached, he was entitled to keep both the license and the money. There's a doctrine of law called material breach of contract, which in a nutshell means you can only sue for breach of contract if the breach materially impacts your contract rights. For example, if my client had failed to pay for the license, that would be a material breach of contract. But getting a notice document 3 days late when full payment had already been made? Yes, it is a technical breach of contract. But no court in the United States of America would deem that to be a material breach. And certainly no court would let the wackadoo keep the license and the money. So we sued the wackadoo who represented himself. He fought okay for a pro se, but the judge of course ruled against him because his position was crazy. The wackadoo kept the money and my client got the license. In law school doing legal aid, my client was charged with uttering threats. He said something like, "I'm gonna put you 6 feet underground," to his ex-girlfriend, while brandishing a large knife. His defense was that yes, he said it, but he wasn't uttering threats. He just wanted to scare her into legitimately thinking he was going to kill her, because at the time he was angry and he wanted her dead. He thought this was a full defense. Dude, what are you doing? We were defending a hostile workplace claim. I'm speaking with the manager who allegedly threatened violence against the plaintiff. I tell him one of the allegations is that he threatened to kill the plaintiff during his annual review. The manager says, "No way. All I did was..." He opens his desk drawer and places a pistol on the desk in front of me. "Was put this gun on the table. It wasn't even pointed at him." A woman was getting sued following a car accident. I asked her what happened. She said, "Well, I meant to hit the brake, but accidentally hit the gas and rear-ended them." Well, crap, I'm not winning that one. As a former public defender, I'd say roughly 50% of the cases assigned to me were completely undefendable, typically because of some combination of video evidence, police wear body cams where I was practicing, multiple credible eyewitnesses, my client's name and driver's license on a pawn ticket for stolen goods, or my client just straight up admitted to the police that they did it. I don't want to get into specifics because of attorney-client privilege, but I had a few clients who, at our initial meeting, would say they were innocent. It's all a big misunderstanding, and so on. Then I'd show them a video of the police busting in their trailer. Client is on top of his significant other beating the crap out of her with 2 children under 5 present, and then proceeds to fight with the police and ends up getting tased and peeing himself. We could have won that one if only being on lethal amounts of bath salts was a defense. My firm had a guy call in about their son getting hurt at school and them wanting to sue. The The kid dislocated his shoulder and brings a doctor's note to sit out. The kid decides screw it and plays anyway. Dislocates shoulder again and now needs surgery. Dad wants to sue the school. This kid is 17 years old. Yeah, I hate to say it, but your kid needs to be making his own decisions at that point. At the age of 17, he should have a little bit more interest in his own well-being. This guy had this whole story about how the cops came into his house illegally without a warrant or consent. The story sounded really good, and I was excited to get the ball rolling. And he finished the 30-minute story up by telling me that he opened the door while cops and rival gangsters were outside, and fired a couple rounds before closing the door back up behind him. He thought that as long as he went home afterwards, he could do whatever he wanted and the police couldn't arrest him without a warrant. If you open your door and straight up start shooting at police officers, yeah, they're gonna come get you. They don't need a warrant. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.